So I will call the meeting to order at 6:34, and hopefully budgets are on their way, because some things I can do without a net, but I don't think going over a budget verbally is I'm going to do. But there's been a lot of question about who we are and what our governance structure is and what this budget represents, and I did this a week ago in Dummerston, but I wanted to spend a few minutes just reviewing what our new name is, what our new governance structure is, what's disappearing, what's staying, and what this budget will entail. So come July 1, assuming nothing else changes, we're going to have a new entity called Wyndham Southeast School District, which sounds a lot like Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, but they're different, and both of these will be existing after July 1. Right now what we have are these different districts in blue: Putney, Dummerston, Brattleboro, Guilford. BUHS is like, Vatican City cut out here. Its own municipality, its own school district, its own governance board, its own budget, and then Vernon here in pink. So all these districts here, up until now, have had separate governance, separate boards, and they have all been part of the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. That has had its own board, which has representation from all of the districts, 3 representatives from all of these districts that existed, and the Supervisory Union has its own budget. It pays for our lovely superintendent's office, special education, transportation, meals, and business services like HR, payroll, very popular among the teachers in the room. This is going to continue to exist. The Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union, it will continue to exist and continue to have its own budget. What is consolidating is all these blue districts here are and UHS as well are combining into one large district called Wyndham Southeast School District. Vernon is staying its own district with its own governance, and the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union was made up of this very large district here, of the 5 former districts, and Vernon. And Vernon recently petitioned the state board to change representation, so there will be 3 representatives. Is it 3? Am I right? 3 representatives. 5? 5 and 1?
4 and 1.
4 and 1. 4 and 1. Okay. So all these districts will have 4 representatives to approve the budgets and work on policies at the supervisory union level, and Vernon will have 1 representative, so it'll be a board of 5. Yes, Jody.
Be clear that each town has a representative on this SU, I believe. Yes.
We haven't really hashed that out. We're doing representation to the SU board tonight. We're assigning that committee, so we have representation.
Oh, I thought that was already decided. Okay.
No, we haven't voted on that. It makes sense to have 1 from each town, I suppose.
I thought that's what the state board
Oh, that's
said.
what the state board said?
Yes.
It had to be 1 from each town?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think that was in the language.
that was what we asked for.
But I don't think, I think we asked for 4, but I don't think it said it had to be from any town.
Maybe not, yeah, maybe not. I'm not sure why it wouldn't.
More confusion.
Yeah, gee, that's different.
Yeah. So blue, WSESD, plus pink, Vernon, all these districts make purple, the WSESU. Tonight's budget is for these districts here, the WSESD, that we're going to talk about. And in this budget is embedded the portion of the WSESU budget that these districts are responsible for. And that money is sent to the WSU on the basis of the number of students that each district has. So any question on what's happening, assuming nothing happens between now and a week from now? Yeah, Rick.
Hi, quick question, I don't want to be premature. As far as the finance committee for the WSESU, is that going to be the 5 sitting members that are going to be on the WSESU, or is that going to be another breakdown, less people, 3, 4, 5? Or has that been decided yet?
I think it's to be determined, though I think the board was leaning to, because it is such a small board, that the WSESU board was going to be a committee of the whole for finance, because it's only 5 people.
Thanks.
So with 3, you already have a quorum, so, you know.
I didn't mean to veer off on that part, I want to talk budget, so, thank you.
Do we have budgets?
Do you need a driver to run and grab some?
They're supposed to be on their way, but I can go get grab another bunch.
I
I
have
mean,
some,
I'm
I
happy
have
to go get some
things
sometime
around it,
today.
or do we have a way to project it on,
We got it,
tape?
right there.
Because I could, I have is there a way we could make copies of just the cover page for people for the first?
Are there enough to be able to share? I mean, I
The
can
other
share
side
mine.
is under-
If we can get copies of that,
This-
both sides of
I
that?
think this.
Okay.
Is that clear?
I think you phone with this Frank response.
Okay. All right. Can't lose Frank now.
Somebody's coming. From the superintendent's entrance too, I think.
Christina, do you mind if we take a picture of that?
Not it.
I think it'd be helpful for,
It's a very nice teaching tool.
Thank you. I like that he incorporated color theory into an explanation of local government. I thought it was 3 too. I don't know if it's 3 or 4.
Recommend finding a new structure with equal representation of 1 member per town for a total board
Out of
membership.
5, okay. Oh, it is 4.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann.
Oh,
man.
I just got it from an old email from Carrie, that's all.
They're working on someone, but it hasn't happened yet.
But we have someone. We have someone interested. Hooray. What could I do in the meanwhile? Anybody? Ideas of how I could do this without having?
I said we could share.
do you have it
Is there enough?
digitally? Right there? Because there's an interactive projector right there. Which I
Do
think
you have yours digitally, Dan? I've got to open
you
mine.
could take some pictures page by page.
Did Frank send it to us? Who sent it to us? That will help me find it.
It was sent digitally to us before the last board meeting by Frank. I could try.
I mean, I know that computers get plugged into
Yeah.
that at grade level meetings and things get projected right there. It's very nice.
Foster, do you have an idea?
Do you know how to do it?
No, but I'm
Not
thinking
really.
you could probably just
I mean-
plug it in.
Just there are those, some of us in the audience have a copy that we brought
Is
with
there
us.
enough people can
So-
look on?
Yeah, so
that's what we do.
if that would solve the problem.
I have an extra copy. Except the numbers aren't quite right because they've changed since.
They changed since this printing?
No, you have the newsprint copy?
Yes.
Yeah, but what the board members have not gotten their newsprint copy till tonight, so. So, while I'm thinking of it, the budget meeting is the 25th of June. It will be in the BUHS gymnasium. It is much like the BUHS meeting. You sign up, you show up, you vote. The town clerks will be there, so it's your opportunity to vote on a $50 million budget. So if few people show up, you have great responsibility. It could be $1 million per person. So I recommend you show up and
What time?
listen to the budget. Yes.
7, I think.
What's the situation with childcare?
Great question. We have childcare. So I think we have 3 people providing childcare that are licensed childcare providers for this meeting. So come a few minutes early. They will be there from about 10 minutes before the meeting starts. and they've agreed to stay through the end, so. And if you are bringing children, just so to make sure we have enough people, if you know of a lot of people bringing children, if you could just email myself, Christina, what's my new email? Christina K. Naylor I have a new one, so it's Christina N. at Dummerston.org is my old one, and I also have a K. Naylor at WSESU.org. So if you email me, because just in case there's like 50 children coming, I don't want to put a child care provider in difficult position.
I think because it's at 7 p.m., I don't think it's
Yeah.
gonna be that.
Yeah. But I remember when my kids were at a certain age, I would have done anything to have someone take them from 7 to
Anything like go to a budget meeting?
Well, how many people have copies and we could get started? I hate to waste people's time.
I can share mine here. I'll sit next to you, Ben.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure.
We can't find an electronic copy, buried, so.
You know, to put it in Frank's name, but now I'm looking at my attachments and I'm not finding anything.
All right, well,
How many pages is this?
116. Well, yeah, I guess it is staying on the newsprint, it would be about 116 with a small preamble, I think. So, the packet itself contains the usual annual report information, sort of saying who we are, the warning, minutes from our organizational meeting, child find, and then you come to my favorite piece, which is the money part of the matter, this state required form that I'd like to spend just a few minutes going through because it's a change from how we used to have our districts. Jody, do you know what page it is on the?
It's page 18.
Page 18.
And I'd like to say that Christina is probably one of a very few in the state who can explain this.
Now the gauntlet has been thrown down. Thank you, Jody. So if you look on the top of the
18 on
page,
mine. This is what you know.
there are, if you look across line 1, there's 2 budget numbers. There's one from FY19, it's 48,000.
Oh, Christina, I gave you the wrong page.
Oh,
Sorry. I think it's 14 according to Kate over here.
it should look like this, like a lot of boxes. It looks like the government form from the state of
Too
Vermont.
many of them.
And it says Wyndham Southwest School District on the top?
3 years prior comparison.
Yeah.
So they have an FY19, and there's not a 3-year prior comparison, but actually there isn't even a 1-year prior comparison because there's never been a Wyndham Southeast Supervised School District budget before. But what Frank did for that line is combine the budgets from the 5 districts to come out with what our total spending was, expenditures were in FY19, and our revenues and everything else for FY19 if we had been a unified district, and then our FY 2020 budget that we are warning and meeting and voting on the 25th. So our expenditures as a unified district, and this was just simply taking the budget from Brattleboro Town School District, BUHS, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney, combining them all together and coming up with a top line number for all the expenditures. Everything that follows in the report are the individual districts. We have a really beneficial situation for our first year as a unified district because all the budgets have been approved by the individual school boards, and all the budgets, with the exception of Guilford, have been approved by the electorate. So they've gone through the usual scrutiny that budgets have always done. 28 board members have pestered Frank, can you take $10,000 out of this and add it to that column? So it's gone through the regular process. So for this first year, we have the advantage of the 28 board members and a rigorous budget process, and no board, every board has approved a budget, and most of the boards have gone to their electorate comfortable with the fact that their taxpayers would support the budget, and it's what's required to run the schools. So our total expenditures are $50,172,299.
$299?
Okay.
89.
So I do not have the current copy, so there's changes, so I will have the current
Oh,
copy.
thank Frank.
Sorry for being late.
No, it's okay. It's, I've
You
been,
have your excuse from your
I
mother?
was gonna start my tap dancing and singing, so everybody's been spared from that. So when you're calculating our tax rate, the state says we can reduce that tax rate by the revenues that we get from grants, tuition, so that $9,648,986, and it might be off by a few dollars because I have a revised budget. You have a revised budget. So everything that our tax rate's based on.
No, please.
Okay.
Start going on the other side. I was trying to follow her on
So here it is,
video.
page 14. So our education spending for our whole district, which is our expenditures minus our revenues, is $40,523,303. The state of Vermont figures your tax rate on the basis of your per pupil spending, mostly that way. So in order to do that, they need to know our number of pupils, but they use a slightly different number called equalized pupils. If you look across line 15, our equalized pupil number is 2,234 students. That is roughly equal to the number of actual students that we have in our district, but the state weights students slightly differently on the basis of how much they think it may cost incrementally or less to educate them. So for example, a pre-K student is only counted as 0.46 of a student, while a student learning English is about 1.1 of a student. Is that about roughly the number? So there's some link between how many students we have and the equalized pupil number, but the state, there's somebody up there, I think his name is Steve, at the state that figures out the weighting of the pupils statewide and sends us down our number, which is 2234. This is very important because you divide that $40,523,303 by the number of equalized pupils, which is $18,139 per student that we are spending. Now, there's in little tiny numbers, and every school board member can see that because they always look for that. It says threshold, $18,000, I didn't need to look, $18,311. If we go over that, every dollar we spend is taxed $2 for every dollar that we go over that. Nobody likes to go over that number on a school board, and luckily, we are not over that number, so we can just proceed with the initial tax calculation, which is taking that $18,139 per pupil and dividing it by the yield. So the yield is right up here in the corner, top corner up here, 10,648. I think it's another person at the state, we'll call her Marcia, and they figure out what is in the ed fund, how they want the tax rate to look. The legislature argues about it back and forth for the whole session, and usually about the last day of the session, they proclaim this number, which is what we're all waiting for in determining our tax rate. And luckily, when we're warning our budget in June, we actually know what that number is. Usually on town meeting day, or when BUHS has to do it in February, we only have an idea of what the number may be. But the beauty of having it now is the legislature is out of session. They have declared this number to be. So these numbers are actually solid numbers this year. So that property yield, it's the magic number that we divide our per pupil spending by to get a percentage of the threshold. And we are at 170.355 if you look on line 28. That's the percentage of the threshold that we are at. And with the magic of dividing by 100, that percentage becomes our initial tax rate of 1.704 as our initial tax rate. Are you with me? Yes? Seeing nodding? Excellent. So, when we've done town budgets in the past, we had a BUHS budget, we had a local town budget, you had a whole bunch of calculations, but now we are one district. So this first part is done. That's our tax rate for all of our students pre-K through 12 in the WSESD. The thing that we've always had in the towns as well that continues to exist is the common level of appraisal, the CLA. Because our tax rate is based on a statewide tax education funding system, and that's based on the value of your house, if your houses are selling below the appraisal rate or above the appraisal rate, it is not fair on statewide. Right now, Burlington's houses are selling about 30% over their assessed value, and I think in Dummerston, we're at about 97% of our assessed value. So the common level of appraisal is a way to make it fair. And every year, the town clerks send to the state how houses are selling in comparison to the assessed rates, and that is what determines the CLA value. Each town has a different CLA value. So even though our unified district tax rate is $1.70, if houses in Brattleboro are selling for 20% more than the assessed value, and houses in Dummerston are selling for 10% less, we need to find a way to make it fair again. Yes, there's a lot of calculation involved in trying to make a statewide fair tax rate. So if you turn to page 15, you can see that at the top you can look across and you see the school rate of roughly $1.70, and then below that you can see the CLA adjusted rate by town. Below that, you can see 2 years running by town what your CLA factor is. So in the case of Brattleboro, Dummerston, and to some extent Guilford, houses are selling for slightly less than what they're assessed at. So the tax rates then go down to compensate for that difference in your assessed value and the actual market value of your houses. And in the case of Putney, at a CLA of 0.997 this year, their tax rate's going to go up just slightly from the 1.704 to 1.709. And then I should say also that, but wait, there's more, because there's also income sensitivity where for roughly $200,000 property value, 2 acres of land, if you earn up to $140,000, there is an adjustment on the rate you pay. But it is still based on the original rate. So you do pay more if a town is paying more. But that is between you and the state how that works out. I cannot work that out for everybody in the audience, income sensitivity. But what you may see on your tax bill may be quite different from this based on income sensitivity. So is everybody with me on to this point, roughly?
Roughly.
I see.
Sounds overly complicated.
So even in the merged district, each town can have its own different CLA.
For now, yes. And when you think about it, market rates in one town, say, a benefactor in Brattleboro decided to take out dinner at the restaurant of anybody's choice on Friday nights. That would drive the market value of Brattleboro houses up, and other towns wouldn't be affected. So on the basis of fairness, you have to make sure the assessed value and the market value.
No, I'm glad it does. I'm just surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Well, you work with elementary schoolers. We try to keep it fair. Yeah. So if you're all with me on the tax rate, we were hoping to spend a few minutes going into the meat and potatoes of this, which is and the fun part, which is how we spend the money on our children and in our schools. And because we've had a budget process that has been very familiar to all of us, and all the boards have created this budget, a volunteer from each board was going to spend a few minutes just talking about any big changes in the budget, how their budget process went, so we could spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes on each. BUHS gets a little longer because they're half the budget, if you want it, Sean. But just to familiarize people with a broad overview of the sub-budgets that are making up this unified first-year budget. And with that, take it away, Sean Murphy.
All right. So I'd like to say I have a great mentor, and that is Bob Woodworth. So he's always been the guy, and he sent me his notes, so it's been really helpful to have his input. So in October of last year, the Finance Committee from the BUHS District 6 Board got together with administrators and Frank Brucker and gave a charge of trying to find a budget that would be level service as close as possible and level funding. So we reviewed the budget quite a while, and we came up with the budget that was actually presented last week to the public and was voted in favor, but that's going to be happening again on the 25th also. So the first part of the budget is the district-wide budget, which is $11,019,670, which represents a 0.1% increase over the previous year. The next one is the senior high, which is an $8,363,015 budget, which represents a 5.4% increase over the previous year. And I could speak to that increase. There have been some staffing changes at the high school. So the high school is going to reinstate their dean of students, and there'll be an addition of a full-time clinician, which will be partly reimbursed by Medicaid funding. BAMS is the next one with a budget of $3,392,343, I'm sorry, which is a 5.6% increase. And once again, BAMS is going to be hiring a full-time academic support. And once again, that's partly funded by a grant. In addition, we will need to upgrade the Chromebooks at BAMS next year. So that represents some of the increase. And then in both, actually all three campuses here on the BUHS District 6, all three campuses are controlled by contractual wages and benefits. And so that does represent an increase that everybody anticipated because it has been contractually mandated. And also there's been a across the board health insurance increase of 10%. So the budgets that I just mentioned include all of those things. And then the WRCC has a budget of $2,545,972, which is a 0.6% increase. So it's the most level funded. And all those things added together make a budget of $25,221,000, which represents an increase of 2.6% over the previous year. So some of the things that we've done is we've used some of our capital reserve funds to help lower the tax impact on that budget that I just said, that total budget amount. So we have The planned use of the fund balance was $350,000. So we took the fund balance and put it in the revenue side, which was to our advantage in keeping taxes as low as possible. And then there is a complete capital plan, and there are specific things in the capital plan going forward that we'll need to address. But once again, those are all in the, all this information is really pretty succinctly put together in the 2020 budget report for Brattleboro Union High School District 6. So that's about it.
Thank you, Sean. And that document can be found on the WSESU website under the Finance Office. And if you scroll down, you can find the budgets, the original budgets for the various subparts. But most of that is encompassed here as well.
Yes,
I
it is.
believe now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, really.
Sean gave a different figure, at least one of them, for the Wyndham Career Center. So I'm assuming, as you said before the meeting, that this is the correct figure that's in this book.
What?
$2,445,900.
Oh, I didn't think that's what you said, but that is what we've got here, but I thought you said something
Oh,
different.
you know, I might have read the wrong line, so I thank you. Yeah, it's $2,445,972.
And that's what's in this book.
Yes,
Thank you,
that's
Sean.
right. Oh, as a matter of fact, if I could plug my little communication in now.
Yes, is a good time
Okay.
now.
One of the things that we always do with the BUHS board is have a little line item for communication. And I did receive communication today from the principal of the Guilford School, John Gagnon. And he pointed out that I had made a verbal mistake in a previous meeting. So I would like to apologize for that and correct it. I said that the Guilford school had X number of students, and it was too low a number. So the Guilford school now has 118 students, pre-K through 6. So,
Thank you, Sean.
thank you.
Yes, Jody.
It's my understanding, and you didn't mention it, that there's a big amount going into, hopefully, it's going to be a separate article, going into redoing the fields.
That was done last week, so that's done.
So that's in there. So I have an issue with doing that at this time, and
Well, you
so it's possible, I shouldn't, yeah, I have grandkids who are playing on these fields.
We shouldn't talk back and forth, that's not proper.
Yeah.
But I do have an issue with it at this particular time, and so it's something that can be taken out at the annual budget, or presented to be taken out at the annual budget, I'm assuming.
So there can be voted upon changes to the actual budget amount. The public can make it clear what they want to have taken out, but it is up to the board to make those changes happen if that happens on the 25th budget vote.
So is that in the budget now?
Are the fee, that $125,000?
It's in the capital plan, so most of the legacy districts have capital plans, and for BUHS, the reserve in the capital plan covers the cost of the turf field improvement.
So in this bottom line for the high school of $8,363,000, that includes that cost?
It does, in that the capital plan is funded through the annual appropriation, but actually fiscal year 20 that this proposal covers, the plan is to actually fund the first payment out of the reserve. So there's actually no appropriation for the field in the figure that Sean quoted. That reserve fund is there to fund a number of projects, and it it funds the first year, the fiscal year 20 payment. For
So
that.
there's no cost for that in this?
Yeah, there is nothing to take out of the 25,221 that Sean has explained. It's not in that number. It's in a reserve fund.
Thank you.
And to Sean's point on page 19, also there is an ADM, which is kind of very closely related to how many students are in each school. So if you're curious about enrollments at the schools, that is available on page 19. Yes?
I had a question
I'm
about
sorry.
that too, because Guilford sends their kids to BAMS, and I don't see any kids in BAMS from Guilford here, if I'm reading it correctly.
So they're tuition, so they're still part of the BAMS district, but they're tuition.
So they're included in that figure that Sean just gave of 118 students?
No. That's how many students
Are
are in the
they
building.
lost?
That's how many students are in the building, is what he said. In that building, pre-K through 6, is what Sean was stating.
Okay, so how many are in BAMS?
It's
From Guilford?
approximately
Yeah, it's on the sheet.
It looks like,
40, I
it
believe.
looks like 29,
It has
Jody.
29.
Yeah.
29.
Mhm.
29?
Yeah, you see the 7th and 8th grade, 14 and 15. 15 kids in the 7th and 14 in the 6th. I mean, in the 8th.
But actually, that's
Third.
past year, so it'd be 30.
Oh, I see it up here. I was looking at the wrong section.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christina actually,
Let me just,
Okay.
what, are you responding to Jody's, to this?
well, no, I had forgot, I had omitted to give the some enrollment numbers, which I had actually in my report, so if I could just quickly.
You may
do
amend
that.
your report, yes.
Yeah, so this was something that Bob alerted me to today. So BAMS is just in terms of enrollment, it looks like BAMS and BUHS will actually have an increase in enrollment for next year. Currently, they're 285 at BAMS, and next year anticipated will be 315. That's not a hard number because there are always are changes right as you get into the school year. And then BUHS is 810 this year, and it's projected to be 840 students next year. So there'll be approximately a 60 student increase.
Excellent. And I believe you mentioned a lot of those students are tuitioning in too, right? Is that not included in that count?
I don't know the answer to that question.
So there's additional students, yeah. Generally, like for example, these statistics that we're looking at, the current year on page 19, as you have already alerted folks to, the 811 current year, you know, that's just, as you see, the towns listed there.
Mhm.
There are, in addition to that, Vernon students, Marlboro students, Dover students, exchange students, and then there's school choice students that are in addition. Yeah.
Sorry, Molly?
Oh, I just was wanting to let Jody know that at the BUHS meeting, there was a fair amount of discussion about the turf field, including, I don't know if were you able to watch it? Because it might be enlightening. Chris Sawyer spoke for quite a while, and a number of other people in the audience on both sides, so it was an interesting discussion.
No,
worth
I
watching.
read the write-ups on it.
Okay.
Can I just,
Yes.
can I ask, I want to follow up on Joey's question.
I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah, I'm Kate O'Connor from Brattleboro. I just want to go back to the field question. Even though it's in the using, as I understand it, it's out of the $350,000 planned use for the deficit, which is located on page 16. Just because it's in there doesn't mean it has to stay in there. You know, the voters of the district can take that out. I mean, you know what I mean? Just because somebody says we're going to use the reserve fund doesn't mean that the voters can say, no, we don't want you to use the reserve fund for that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's been a point that has been clarified. I don't know if you recall a couple of meetings, annual meetings, so maybe a couple of years ago, Dick DeGray asked the question, does the school board have the authority to spend reserve funds, or do they have to go to the electorate for that? And the answer is in the statutes. The statutes are very clear that the electorate has to establish the reserve fund, but the school board has the authority to spend money once the electorate establishes, in this case, the capital reserve. So the answer is no. The electorate can't direct the board to change their capital plan, but certainly they will influence them by discussion like this.
Right. In this plan, I'm just trying to figure out what happened the other night. There was a vote to pass a $750,000 bond, which this money, or to take out a bond.
No. It's important to distinguish that it's not a bond. A bond is a different section of the statutes.
Right.
And you have to have an Australian
No,
ballot.
yeah,
for a bond.
I didn't mean bond, to take out, to use.
A loan,
A loan
a
for
5-year note.
Yeah, I kept was confusing that the other night.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is this $125,000 that you're gonna take out of, and I'm sorry to keep going on. I won't say any more after this, but the $125,000 that's being proposed to use out of the reserve fund is to pay back that loan.
Yeah.
But do we have to vote on that loan again at the at the June
No.
25th?
No.
Okay.
And you're raising a really good question, and it's taken some folks a little time, even on the finance committee, to really kind of understand. I think what you're getting at is a really good question. Well, how is the capital fund funded? I think, and you know, Jody's question is the same thing. Well, is there an appropriation within the 25 million to pay the 125,000 or to buy a new field? It's a very logical question. And the way you can understand that is if we get into the details of the BUHS budget, I can help you understand the way the capital fund is funded annually. So I'll get you to the right page here. It's down the line just a little bit. I think it's going to be on page 82, but let's see, make sure. Okay, I'm at 82. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So it's the report, page 82. We're into what Sean referred to as the district-wide portion of the BUHS budget.
There's two different numbers here. One number is 82 and one number is 57. So which number?
You're on the right page.
I'm on the right page.
Yeah, and what it is the page number here is for the whole booklet, and the page number on the side is when BUHS budget was developed and printed. So you're on the right page. So I'm going to count from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th line down. The 7th line down, you see that as capital plan building improvements is what that abbreviation is, but you can see capital plan. And then, okay, and then you see in fiscal year 18, there was an appropriation in the general fund. All of this is the stuff that adds up to the 25 million that voters vote on annually at the annual meeting. So you can see that there was a budget of 350,000. So that means the tax rate, raised money to fund a portion of the long-term capital plan in that year, fiscal year 18. And then in fiscal year 19, 190 was budgeted. That's this year. And then in fiscal year 20, this gets to your question, Jody's, and your question, you see that number is 0. That's what I mean by there's nothing to cut in the general fund, the 25,221,000 associated with the turf field. And then you say, well, who's paying for it? And that's where, as you already noted on page 16, we come back to the reserves, the fund balances. So on page 16, the BUHS high school at the very bottom of the document has a general reserve of $2,331,000. So we talked about that at the annual meeting on June 12th. But they also have the 726,000 reserved Actually, right now, it's 1,446,000, but the plan is that the board has voted and made a commitment to that capital improvement, and then the electorate approved the borrowing if needed. At this point, it's actually not needed, but obviously there are many other projects that are being considered. At this point, the 726,000, and then to whatever extent the 2,331,000 is decided to be utilized for that improvement, the funding is available. And prior tax rates and prior budgets created these reserves, not the future, not this budget.
Yes. Jody Normando from Dummerston.
I'm glad you know who I am. Are you saying that the high school has $2,331,428 plus $726,702?
That's right.
So this is not telling us that in 18 that we have this, they're both capital fund reserves. I guess I don't understand that, but
Yeah, the first column on page 16 is the general fund reserve.
Oh, and the capital fund.
And the second column is capital. Yeah.
So combined.
And you're right, they are cumulative. You add them up.
Okay.
One's not a subset of the other.
Can we turn the page on $25 million and move on to the Brattleboro Town District, which, pulled my pen out to make a note. Starts, 86, thank you.
86 on which side?
There's only 86 and 87 on that page, it's at the bottom.
86. Okay, thank you.
So who was volunteering to give an overview? Was it you, Robin?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna be here, so I asked
Okay.
Robin to do it. Actually, we asked Frank to do it, but I can do it. If you'll turn to page 98, which is the end of the Brattleboro Town District section, at the bottom is the bottom line of $15,368,219, which is a $708,000 increase of 4.83%. And as you've heard and will continue to hear, most of that comes from the negotiated salary increases and the over more than 12% increase in health insurance premiums for our employees. So if you turn to page 86, we'll talk about what we did about that. You see in the middle of the page, general fund expenditures and then surplus or deficit. You can see across that line for FY18, we took $130,000 from the reserve fund as revenue to moderate the tax rate. In last year, the year we're in now, we took $330,000 and we proposed and was passed by the town and proposed in this budget to take another $330,000 out of our reserve fund to again to moderate the effects of that increase on the taxes. And then if you go to, so the effect of that is that we have a tax rate. And if you go to page 15, let you turn your pages. 15. This shows the tax rate after this is the unified tax rate after the common level of appraisal, which is different in each town, is considered. And for Brattleboro Town, the CLA adjusted homestead school tax rate for the coming year will be $1.64.2. And if you then go back again to 87, where at the bottom you have a 3-year comparison of tax rates, and the last number there is it's not an accurate number because we weren't able to get the correct number of equalized students from the Agency of Education, so we don't really know what the tax rate would have been for this year. So the best thing we can do is compare what we have, which is the 164.2 with what we had last year, which was 158.2, so the Brattleboro tax will be up 6 cents.
David, where are you?
On the bottom of 87,
Yes?
you see the tax rate for FY 17, 18, and 19. And then we just looked on page 15 at the tax rate for 2020, and it was 164.2, and that's a 6 cent increase.
4 cents,
I'm lost.
because you're using the CLA.
The
The
CLA
20
adjusted rate is 164.2, and last year's tax rate.
Oh, I see, last year's, I thought you
Yeah,
were saying for
yeah.
this, okay.
So what taxpayers are gonna pay compared to last year, because we don't have the numbers to compare it to what it would have been not merged. But that's what it would be compared to what they paid last year.
I'm looking at something that says 1.605 at the bottom of 87.
Yeah, that's what we passed with the numbers that were estimated for equalized students.
Okay.
But since those numbers, we don't know those numbers are correct, we don't know that that's what the rate would have been for 2020. So we can't compare what it would have been to what happened when we merged, because we don't know what it would have been. So we can compare the merged rate, which we do know at this point,
Okay.
better than we typically do at this time of year.
So this is just the Brattleboro rate
Yeah,
that
so
it
this
would
is,
have been.
yeah, the
Okay,
Brattleboro
thank
rate
you.
is 164.2, and last year it was 158. So that, the comparison is how much it went up year to year.
Thanks,
So
David.
people can have something to compare to.
Thank you, David. Any questions on Brattleboro Town's budget? Moving right along to page 99 is the Dummerston Town School District budget. We had a couple of, and really page 100, that whole, if you turn the page to 100 is the whole breakdown of our budget and our tax rate. So if you look across line 16, you will see that number of 18,491, which is over 18,311, which was really upsetting to the Dummerston board because we're over the threshold, and as you recollect, you get double taxation, so for every dollar you get taxed $2 over the threshold. But the state was very late in getting us our grant information and only sent some grants to the SU and didn't break them out, so when we actually warned our budget, we had 140,000. At the end of a meeting, a board member said, I pray $50,000 comes to put us under the threshold, and lo and behold, we got notification that we had our small school grant of 80,000 roughly, and a 60,000 transportation grant. So in the end, the budget we warned and the budget we approved was different than the budget we warned, and it was under the threshold. And our resulting tax rate was $1.66. The reason our budget was up was that Dummerston, for the past 2 years, has been trying to implement pre-K. And that is a very expensive first-year implementation, because the other thing I didn't tell you about equalized pupils is they look back 2 years and take a 2-year average. So if you're adding children into your programs, and it's really good to have teachers there and school supplies there for children, and heat and air conditioning for those children. So you have all those expenses the first year you start your pre-K program, but you don't get to count the preschoolers in your equalized ADM and your equalized pupil number. It doesn't affect your tax rate until half of them are counted the first year, roughly, and then all of them are counted 2 years later. So that increased our tax rate, but we had been kind of saving our surpluses and watching our pennies carefully, and chose to put our surplus that we had accumulated to cushion our tax rate during that first year. And we believe very strongly that implementation of pre-K is full day school year. We have 10 slots to start for 4-year-olds. That it is a great way to improve outcomes for children, to bring down special education costs long-term for the district, because you can identify students who need extra help early on and bring them those supports when they're 4 years old as opposed to when they're 5 and 6 years old. And that's some of the most cost-effective things we can do with school boards. So even though the state funding formula does not help support schools implement pre-K, it is a fiscally sound and conservative action to take as a school board. And so we were very excited that we could, with our small school grants, get under the threshold. Just like everybody else, we have the, I think on average, 11.9% contractual increase in healthcare costs, contractual increases with teachers' salaries. We did do some unfortunate cuts. We lowered our guidance position from 100% guidance position to an 80% guidance position. We had increased it from 60 to 100 2 years ago and moved it back down to 80 to try to alleviate the tax rate, a slight reduction in our music program to alleviate the tax rate, and a little bit in our technology program as well. So we were really working to try to stay under that cap. But very excited that we are welcoming 10 preschoolers into our new early learning center. Yes?
I didn't hear what you quoted for the transportation grant.
I think it was around $60,000.
Okay, that's what I
More or
thought it
less.
was, but I didn't hear correctly, so I just wanted to double check. Thank you. That's what it was supposed to be.
Yes, Mr.
So
Mills.
for next year's budget, that student projection for preschool would be 5 students to be able to be counted. And would they wouldn't be full-time students to be counted though, right? They'd be percentage thereof as well,
Their
right?
pre-K students are counted as 0.46 of a student. It's a little more complex because they may have been counted under contracted pre-K services, but generally what I've seen is in the towns that have implemented pre-K, which is our hope, is that more pre-K students come into districts, and we are supporting more pre-K students, which is a good thing, which is, what our intent is to do.
But for next year's budget, will only be 5?
For next year,
Percentage thereof of 5?
yeah, it'd be 0.46 of 5, assuming that they are all incremental to pre-K and weren't being tuitioned in.
We're hoping to get more kids next year, the year after, correct?
For this, well, it will be the will of this board come budgeting season next year, and I cannot find the will of this board now what we budget for, but I know there's interest for it, and it's very hard to start a pre-K program. It's handled not by the AOE, it's handled by DCF and partly AOE, so it was getting that first year with the 10, which is a magic number for them, was really what we had to set our sights on for this first year.
I just want to add that we're turning 3 that we know of away, because we'd have to get another teacher in order to have more. So hopefully we will be able to do that in the future.
Do the outlying preschoolers still count, like Timson Hill?
So that's what I meant by the contracted services, that if there's a arrangement with the state that the school district gets to count that 0.46 of a preschooler, and then we send money to the under contracted services, we send money to those preschoolers that will cover 10 hours of preschool for those students, whereas now we're providing full day school year for the preschoolers we're doing in-house. So, but by law, those contracted services will still occur at the preschools that are in that program.
We'll be able to count them though or not?
Yes, we still, well, assuming the legislature doesn't change anything next year,
Right,
they
right.
still count, yes. They still count towards our ADM.
So we got some in-house, we got some abroad.
Exactly.
But they all count.
But they all count. Moving on to Guilford. Guilford is on page 107. Kelly, are you doing Guilford, or would you like Frank? Would you like to phone a friend and have Frank do it?
If you wouldn't mind.
Don't mind at all, sure. So the Guilford budget overview, here we are. If we go to our summary document, in a similar format as our other districts, so page 106. The Guilford board went through many scenarios. similar to what Dummerston had done as well in terms of considering an expansion of the pre-K program, revisited academic support programs, considered the potential change in tuition obligations associated with the middle school arrangement that they have with Brattleboro Union. But in the end, I would say at least six versions of budget deliberations. In the end, page 106, you see 3,112,000 up 190,500 and a 6.5% change. And the impact on page 107, again, this would have, of course, been hypothetical if the district remained separate. But on page 107, Justice Christina's given us an overview of the whole system. It's the same document format where when you run the board proposed budget divided by the students of 153 equalized students, we came down to 18,200 per student. And at the very bottom, you see tax rate projected to be a little lower than it is presently. And this, again, as David has also pointed out, hypothetical comparison. $698 versus $702. So this has been integrated into, of course, the full plan. Christina, as you were saying, in Dummerston, the Guilford board also looked at, I would say, just about every position, and initially had made cuts in PE and art and in some of the academic programs as they considered an expansion of pre-K, but knowing they wanted to stay below the threshold, ultimately they restored some of those core programs like music and PE, and then did add some after-school programming expense as an additional investment for the new year. So that's an overview. They also have used projected 75,000 of their fund balance to keep that projected tax rate level. And even after that, as you see on page 106, we have the estimated tax rate. There's 3 columns on the bottom of the page. You see FY20 general fund, even after using the 75,000, projected to be 93,000. In a reserve fund, 126,000 for capital. Guilford has done a great deal of improvements in the school under their energy system for both heating source and the control systems, along with a lot of insulating and thermal improvements.
Any questions on Guilford?
I had one question. I don't know if I'm reading this right, Frank. So I just was wondering, like, one of the things that's interesting to me as we merge is looking at cost comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have this right that if I look on page 99 with Dummerston, total expenditure $3,067,500, and then Guilford is 3,1125? Is that right?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
It is, and yet the number of students is not.
Well, it is from the state's point of view as it relates to setting a tax rate.
Okay.
Because this all kind of changes in the new year, but historically, the state looks at Guilford pre-K through 8, just like Dummerston. So that's why when you look at page 107 in Guilford, the number there is 153.65. That includes those 7th and 8th graders. So in Dummerston, as you see, it's a very similar number, 152.95. So you can see you know, a lot of similarities there, but the actual disbursement of funds, Dummerston, of course, you hire your staff for 7 and 8. Guilford, it's all a tuition payment to bands.
But is that 3, and I can ask you later, because I just need private tutelage, I think. I guess I'm not, I thought that their number of 3,067, or 3,067,000 was for the pre-K to 6 portion, no?
So for Guilford, yeah, let's look at that. So the total budget on page 106, 3,112,000.
Sorry, I was looking on the wrong page.
That's okay, yeah. So 3,112,000, and as you were saying, you know, that is a comparable number to Dummerston's, page 99, 3,067,000. And similar number of students, actually a couple more, as you see, right, in terms of equalized students. So we'll get to your other question, but, you know, again, rounding numbers, 153 in Dummerston, actually it's identical if you round it, so 153. So the big difference, though, is in Guilford, if we look at the secondary portion of their budget, that's where I think it'll help explain what you're trying to understand. So page 117, on the bottom of the document, you see right in the middle of that page, on page 117, secondary tuition. Now, of course, Dummerston may have a secondary tuition. It's the second group of accounts on that page 117.
I'm not seeing it, but I can let this go and we can talk later if nobody else.
Well, it's a good question. So are you? I'm looking at that 117 in the booklet like this.
Yeah, I am too, but I'm not seeing secondary.
And then 3rd line down, it says secondary tuition under the description.
I see it now.
Oh, good. Okay. So the difference is between Dummerston and Guilford is you both have the K through 8, pre-K through 8 student counts on that page that Christina's done such a nice job of helping explain. How do we calculate tax rates?
Yeah.
The difference is that the 380,000 in that line, it is included in the $3 million budget.
Oh, it is, okay.
It is included, yeah,
Okay.
all of these numbers add up to that $3 million number that we've been comparing.
Okay.
But the difference is, you know, the kids are not physically in Guilford, as they are in Dummerston. That's why Sean was using a number of 118 kids in Guilford. Well, it's probably 118 kids in Dummerston, K through 6. Yeah. So.
Okay, so that answers my question, that 3 million is a pre-K to 8 number.
Is.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Thank you.
And the things that change is that there is no longer going to be a payment in the future between the Guilford school and the...
Because it's all one.
Yeah, it's all one.
It's Franz.
Franz Reichman from Brattleboro. So we've come to understand that because the state did not provide equalized student numbers for each separate town, there's no way to calculate an accurate fiscal year 20 tax rate. We don't know the number of equalized students. So where did the 153.65...
Could I just interrupt you on that sentence?
Sure.
So just to clarify, we do know fiscal year 20 equalized students, and as Christina's outlined, we can make a very precise calculation about the fiscal year 20 tax rate for the SD, the supervisory, what do we call it?
School district.
The SD, school district, Wyndham Southeast School District. But we can't do that calculation for the individual town. So I know you know that, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, that's exactly where I was going. But, so I'm just wondering, the number 153.65 that we've just been looking at for Guilford, where did that number come from?
So that is an estimate, and that estimate you see in Dummerston's case on page 100 is an identical number, in terms of assumptions. For Dummerston, the assumption on page 100, you can see, was just an identical number, and then for Guilford, you're asking, how did we go from 149 on page 107 to 153? And the answer, it goes back to that document that we've talked about a few times now, way back on page 19, that student census document we looked at a few times. So when we looked at this data, this is the source data that the state uses for equalized students. But then, as Christina pointed out, they add a lot of factors to that we don't have access to. Like how many of our children are in poverty. And then the state makes a factor on that. But the point is that if you look at the three sets of data, the top set is the most recent census on page 19, where we have a system total of 2,562 kids. You see that in the far right-hand column. The second set of data is the same census data the year earlier. So the top is November of 2018, which is our most recent census. And then the middle data is 2017, and then the bottom data is just the difference. So when you look at Dummerston, you see the second line down in the bottom set of data, the number says that they're down one student. That's why we didn't drop them a student, but that's why we left them at the same. The next line down, you see it says Guilford is up 13 students. Now, we didn't add 13 students to the equalized student count, but we did add some students. As you see, we went from 149 to 154. That was our basis. It was like the trend is up, and when we look at equalized data as it relates to the actual student counts, sometimes we can see patterns and sometimes we can't. But the basis of these assumptions was, if you go back 2 years, 3 years of equalized student data, and you look at the relationship between census data and then how it turned out in the state's translation, we looked at those patterns and we came up with the best guess we could. But it is informed on trends and this data. But it absolutely is not official.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done, Frank. People know more about equalized pupils than they probably ever wanted. Any other questions on the Guilford budget? Then that leaves Putney on page 120, 121. And I believe Ann Beekman will take that away.
Well, I'd make Tim do it, but he's kind of busy right now.
Oh, lovely.
So, Putney's budget this year, and please bear with me because I have a very hard time reading the numbers because of my eyes, is $3,403,070, which represents a raise of 4.4%, which is more or less level funded, level serviced, and we had to add a para. We've had a number of retirements, which will reduce some of our costs as far as personnel goes, but like everyone else, we've had a rise in our health insurance. That represents a per pupil spending of $17,752, which is up 1% over last year. This does not quite reflect our budget this year because between passing this and the present time, our rising second grade cohort exploded, and we have to hire another second grade teacher. It would be quite uncomfortably crowded in our second grade class next year, so we have taken care of that. Our tax rate with the merged district will rise about, actually, 0.023% in cents, which is not terribly different than what we had warned to our constituents. We also spent $18,000 from our reserve fund to establish the nonprofit that is our school forest, which had been agreed upon with all of the districts way back when. So we've established that and we preserve it as an educational resource, which we are hoping that the entire merged district will take advantage of. Frank is way better at explaining this to me, so if there are any further questions, I'll try, but you'll probably wind up with his answer.
Hearing none. Are there any other general questions? Do you all feel you're ready for your quiz? The quiz will be Tuesday, 7 p.m. Childcare will be provided. Various school board members, if you're needing a ride, contact a local school board member and they will get you in touch with somebody. I know Jamie was willing to bring people from Putney. I'm surely willing to bring people from Dummerston, and we have board members that are scattered around, so if anybody needs a lift getting there, because you have to be there to vote, it is a floor vote, it is not Australian ballot. Yes, Franz?
I'd like to make a couple of remarks, if I may, on behalf of the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee. People from Brattleboro are familiar with us, I think. People in other towns perhaps less so. But every year we do an analysis of budgets that affect Brattleboro taxpayers, the town budget and also the school district budgets. Over the winter we did that, as we usually do, for the Brattleboro Town School District and the Brattleboro Union High School District. And we made available our reports in February and March for people to look at and try to understand those budgets from our perspective. So those two reports are still available, definitely at the town website, brattleboro.org, and I'm not sure if they're up on the WSESU website still, but the two Brattleboro districts, the Union High School and the Town School District, comprise a pretty large majority of the money in the merged budget. So people may be interested in reviewing those reports that we did several months ago. We've also done a report on the merged budget that'll be voted on a week from tonight, and that is available both at the brattleboro.org website under the Finance Committee reports and at the WSESU website under the merged school district section. So people who want to see what we've had to say about the merged budget can look at either of those two websites and see our full report. There is something in the report that I want to address also, which has very much to do with the thing that's been discussed several times, which is the number of equalized pupils. We took estimates for the unmerged budget tax rates and put them in our report, and then came to understand that those are really just estimates. Those are not, even as it appears, as we discussed tonight in this report, you have to take those things with a grain of salt. They're not actual tax rates that would have been in place without the equalized pupil numbers, and without going through the full budget process, you couldn't get to a definite tax rate. So I'm urging those of you who do look at our our report on the fiscal year 20 merged budget, don't take that too seriously as a comparison with what the tax rates would have been without the merger. And I want to also sort of emphasize our conclusion, which is that the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee does support the budget as it's proposed. We recognize there may be some changes at the meeting next week, but we think that the process that the school boards went through, although different and at times a little perplexing, has resulted in a budget for the merged district that we can support in the service of educating our kids. And I think that's what I have to say right now, but again, people who want to see what we've had to say about the Brattleboro portions of the merged budget and the total merged budget, those reports are available online. Thank you.
Thank you for all your work, Franz, and giving another perspective. These perplexed board members, welcome any help you can give us in these challenging budgeting times.
There was plenty of complexity to go over.
Anything else? All right, that concludes our public forum on the budget. We can move forward with our regularly scheduled, oh, sorry, Sean.
Did you do a coalescence of what the actual big budget is? I'm not sure, did I hear that number?
50 million. Oh, I'm not sure I have the right number there. Let me get the real one.
50,172,299.
Is that the one?
I have 289.
Okay, this is what Franz had in here, so.
I have $50,172,289. What is it, Frank?
That's correct.
Where are they?
89?
Page 4, well, I'm taking it from page 14, my favorite sheet, the 3-year tax comparison.
Yep, it's also on page 13. Same number, yeah.
So that is the budget we will be voting on.
So the 89 is what it is.
The 89 is what it is, yes. We saved $10.
Yes.
All right.
Donut holes at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So I just want to add communications under the clerk's report. And I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 6th and June 11th with my deep thanks to Tim for taking the minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Emily. Any discussion? Yes, Sean.
I should have pointed out right in the beginning, but my name is spelled S-H-A-U-N. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of June 6th and June 11th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Also, we have one person interested in being our, what do people want me to call it? We call it note taker, minute taker, board recorder. Thank you. The BUHS calls it board recorder, so that is what it shall be called. So we have some interest in the board recorder. One applicant.
One email of possible interest.
Oh, that's all I need. That's all I need to hear. So I don't think since we approved looking for a note taker, in a previous, we had a motion and approved seeking a note taker. I'd ask Lyle to move forward and see if she can turn that inquiry into a definite person here to take notes at the agreed upon compensation from our last meeting. That would be fabulous. Any communications? Just have one sort of correction. The last meeting we were looking for, what was it now? In the last meeting we were thinking that something was not in our warning for the annual report. And we were thinking it needed to be added.
Childcare.
No, it was, didn't write this down, I just remembered this because we had thought that Barb had not included something in the note-taking, but it was actually the second, the naming of the district. We had asked that the naming of the district be included in the organizational meeting minutes because we thought it had been omitted. It was not part of the organizational meeting minutes, it was the first meeting of the district, which happened moments later, and it was a very late night, hence our confusion as a board. So I just want to make it very clear that Barb Nowakowski made no mistakes here. It was our misrecollection of the events. So I hope the record is considered amended. Any other communications? Great, moving on to unfinished business. We had tabled the discussion of the Brattleboro proposal for their fund balance use from the previous meeting because nobody had a chance to review it. It was getting late and people were getting crabby, so I've put it on first order of business now so that it is not getting late and people hopefully have had a chance to review. And thank you for coming in, Michaela. And we tried to make it early.
This is early.
This is early yet. There's still a lot left, so.
Early for y'all.
Yes.
Late for some others.
And there was also a question about what fund balances could be used for and what the fund is that they were using and was this statutorily acceptable? And that was the other reason to table it till Frank was here to let us know if there were any issues with that they weren't taking it from a capital fund, I understand, but is the proposal an acceptable use of the funds?
I'm sorry, could I just clarify something before we get too deep into this? That we had determined as a board that our understanding was that we could not use our general fund in any directed way without the reserve fund, the general reserve fund, without the approval of voters. And so that's why we would just be making an amendment to the budget rather than allocating our own general reserve fund.
Okay. So this was a very bad, poor naming of the action item. So it's going to be hard for me to get over that, but I will try. So it's a budget increase with, maybe I'm going to turn it back to Frank because how would this progress?
Okay, so I see the proposal here is to create a fund. So as Robin is saying, the electorate needs to create a reserve fund if it has a specific purpose. And this clearly has a specific purpose. And did the Brattleboro Town School Board take any action?
The action that we took was that we all voted in support of a motion to be made from the floor at the general annual meeting to add $100,000 to the WSESD FY20 budget with the intention that it be used to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. So we're not actually creating a fund or utilizing our fund, we're just asking the board to spend money on this.
So that seems like a clear path, no issues with that. Given that this is a newly elected board, typically a request would have been considered and contemplated in November, December, January, and in all of the assessment of outcomes and investments and all of that, of course, as all of you have done, would have been done. Here, we are just in a one-of-a-kind process that didn't allow for that. So from that point of view, I'm just making the obvious point that you probably don't need to, but typically you wouldn't have a board going to an annual meeting and changing their proposal that they've already recommended to the public and warned, right? That's unusual. But in this case, it's understandable why.
Yeah, it was unusual that the board warned a budget within minutes of their first meeting ever, so
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of time to consider making changes to it at that time.
Let me do board members first. So this will not, so will we spend money, will we use money from reserves? Would that be the concept, that we would use money from surpluses or reserves to defray under revenues?
No, what I just heard is that if the electorate amends the 50,122 to 172, 50,172 to 50,272, then it's an operating expense that again, it goes back to the board's discretion. The electorate can't direct the board, but certainly if there's discussion and approval, then the board's well informed. The answer is no in that, and if this scenario develops, then the tax rate would change a little bit, not much, but it would change, and it would appropriate funds for operations that would fund these programs, and there would be no use of reserves.
And what would happen to the reserve then?
So the reserves that are defined and funded, there's an article in the Articles of Agreement that say the merged board, the new board, will recognize the reserve funds and their designated purposes until those reserves are used for those purposes. So, to answer the question in the context of a proposed amendment, there's no effect on the reserves because the tax rate funds the new money in that year. No effect on reserves.
Yes, David?
When I asked to have this on the previous budget, it was primarily just to let this board know that we had done that. Or we'd said that we supported that and we would bring it to the floor. And but since the board's taken it up and talked about it pretty thoroughly, I'd like to move that offer the board the opportunity to make the same statement that this board supports a motion to raise the budget by $100,000 to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Jody?
I'm confused, and I've had a couple of phone calls from people asking me about this. I explained it from my knowledge of the last meeting when David made the presentation that this was going to be funded through their fund and it wouldn't cost any more and you were going to do it for a 5-year period. So I explained to these people my knowledge of that, and now I'm confused that that's not the way it's going to be. So I guess it's just going to be an increase in the budget, period,
That's
with this motion.
That's my understanding.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Christina.
Yes, sorry, Jamie. Can you state your name?
Yes,
I can select.
yeah, Jamie Comtois, Putney. I am curious about the process by which multiple school boards have gone through prior to merging all of our funds. That some of us in Putney, we just were able to take some of our reserve funds and put them into our school forest because we had to figure out how to not have the school forest be a part of our school property anymore as a part of the merger. And as others will explain, that was a part of our long-term goal anyway. I'm curious about the fact that I thought several school districts had gone through a process by which they were taking those reserve funds that were available and doing things that were really critical before the merger occurred. And I thought when I first heard about this process that that was what was going to happen, because it was very well publicized about the very special funds that Brattleboro had set aside over time. So I'm kind of curious how those processes differ. Like, why wouldn't that same pathway be available to Brattleboro that was available to Putney? And maybe other.
I think timing was the issue in Brattleboro. I think it was just an issue of timing. That they didn't, and I don't think that's entirely because people did their budgeting as a standalone budget. So Dummerston spent their surplus to lower the tax rate and not to do programs that we would like to do, which, you know, that was what we chose to do with it, whether it was a merged board or not. So I don't think Guilford spent theirs, they only used surplus to bring down their tax rate. So I think different boards had different viewpoints of their surplus. So I don't think there was no mandate that came to me as a board chair that said, use your surplus on projects that you want to get done. So, but some people, in the case of Putney, there was a need with the Putney Forest, so that was done in Putney's case. Some of the surplus was used to that. Does that basically outline? So I just want to, I'm not saying right or wrong, I am just presenting the program as it is unfurled in a very hasty, messy process that has been very hard on all the people at this table. So there's been different viewpoints of that, and I just think that Putney had time, you all in Putney had time with your forest to figure out what you were going to do. Not everybody did that in this process.
And if I could just add to that, so I agree with all of that. And then, and speaking particularly about the timing, I don't know if you recall how important it was to have all of the conservation agreements in good order by the November date. And because the articles of agreement basically say that you have to have those transfers and, defined and essentially implemented before that November date. So that's one issue. The other is that in the Putney case, this kind of speaks to if the electorate had set up a reserve fund, and then there was funding in that reserve fund, it gives the board the authority to do those things that you were referring to. In this case, the electorate hasn't created a reserve fund for this program proposal. So that foundation has not been created. So it's Christina she definitely answered your question, but what I'm suggesting is, in the future, if we want to do these sorts of things, if we want a restricted fund for, in this case, that serve as a resource for school teams as this proposal outlines, we have to have the electorate create that reserve. And then once it's funded, it's the school board that then can disperse the money. But maybe as another general point, if this is intended to be a core operational part of the school district, it's very unusual to fund core operations through a reserve fund. Teacher salaries, heat and lights, things that are germane to running a school are expected to be in the general fund. That's by state law and school board rule. It's also a basic tenet of governmental accounting standards board rules. So I'm just suggesting if this is intended to be an ongoing core, like the diversity program has been at BUHS, You generally, it's not a good idea to try to put it into a separate, fund. It should be part of the operations of the district that are funded by the annual tax rate.
Yes, Ron?
So, I just wanted to clarify a few things, that we're not advocating the creation of a fund for this. And I think might be helpful to everyone's understanding if I just give a little bit of background about what the process was with considering our use of our reserve fund that has then morphed into a completely unrelated request. So we did use a very substantial amount of our general reserve fund to cushion the tax rate, $330,000. And as we're going into a merge budget, that ends up actually cushioning everyone's tax rate a little bit instead of just, Brattleboro. So we were using our reserve fund the same way as everyone else, except for Putney that did this separate foresting. But we did still have a lot left in the reserve fund, $842,354. And so, because that was money collected from Brattleboro taxpayers for the purpose of educating Brattleboro students, we felt obligated to see what Brattleboro people wanted us to try and do with that money. And during that process, it came to be our understanding that we would not be able to spend it on anything without getting the approval of our town meeting representatives, because we have a different process than the other towns for town meeting. There's just people that have been elected to vote on our budget, and if a quorum of them don't show up, then we can't do anything. And it didn't seem likely that we would be able to gather a quorum of those 150 or whatever it is town reps. So that's why we sort of dropped the idea of allocating this. But some of the proposals that we did receive during that time, when we had these public meetings about it, was about energy efficiency improvements at Oak Grove School, about improving their playground, and this proposal about the supporting the Office of Diversity. Now, we had a lot of the energy things that had been asked for in our capital plan already planned, so hopefully the board will go forward with that. And we, after discussion with the principals of the schools, decided that playground improvements should be considered in the regular process. But this proposal seemed like a unique chance to really fund this department at a level where they can have a significant impact. In the past, it's been one person at BUHS with a budget of $6,000 and has been sort of on the goodwill of BUHS and of Michaela serving the entire supervisory union. But the amount of impact that she was able to have with that tiny budget and just one person spread among these 10 schools and located mostly at BUHS was not as significant as what we were hoping for, especially for the rest of the schools. So that's why last fall we asked for this position to be moved to WSESU and adding another staff member and more money. However, the amount of money that we had approved as a supervisory union to add to the department was just another $6,000, but it doesn't really allow the very significant work that is needed in this area as far as correcting the inequities in our staffing and the sort of room to grow that we have in our making our the knowledge of our staff and the school culture and curriculum to where it needs to be meeting the needs of all of our students in this area. So even though it's very unusual that we are asking for the board to add $100,000 to its budget, and I know a lot of schools were like biting their nails over even the budgets that they have to get there, this is as dire a need as PE teacher in Guilford or the music teacher in Dummerston to have our students' needs be met at this level. So I recognize that it is very unusual, but I hope that understanding how we got to this make a little bit more sense to everyone, because I know that it seems really confusing.
Thank you for that. I also want to say, though, I'm a little also concerned that I have warned, at the request of board members, resolution for fund balance use, and this whole document was about fund balance use, and so it's just now that I'm figuring out that this isn't really what we're talking about now, so.
I feel like this was the conversation that we had last week, though, when we said we're not gonna spend it on the fund balance. We can't spend it, instead we're asking for
Well, there
an
was a whole
amendment to the
back and
budget.
forth. It did not occur to me, and so I didn't change the warning here, and I sent out the agenda, anybody need any changes, and this says fund balance use, so I'm just also a little concerned that now that I'm understanding and hearing, because then I was thinking, oh, we're gonna take 100,000 out of the fund balance and the tax rate isn't gonna change. So that was my kind of, okay, that's what they want, that's what they're asking, but now the tax rate's changing, our expenditures are changing, and so how that can happen from the floor or through this board are options, but I'm feeling a little funky that I have put something about a fund balance use on the warning here, and I've not warned changing our budget that we've just explained, so that's,
Are you speaking right now about the agenda, right?
yes.
Yes, not the
Yes.
warning.
My agenda, well, the agenda's warned 48 hours in advance of things we'll be taking action on at this meeting.
Yeah.
So if there wanted to be discussion about, I mean, we can decide as a board that we want to endorse it on the floor, but I'm not sure that we can take action because I'm thinking it was a fund balance, and that's sort of my error, not really understanding it. So, I'm sorry, Kelly's had her hand up for a bit, sorry, I took you out of order.
So I'm kind of at a disadvantage because I'm very new to this budgeting process as far as this, so please bear with me.
Heck of a time to start.
That's right. So this $100,000, I'm wondering how will that, maybe it would be a minimum amount, I mean, based on the size of the whole budget, but how will that these are the questions and concerns that I have. How will that affect the tax rate, and how will that affect will it affect the per equalized pupil number?
The per pupil figure for the equalized tax rate? I mean, the per pupil figure is
that's what
good.
I'm asking.
So I came up with $18,184 would be the new per pupil tax rate, but it has almost no impact on, so that's the per pupil rate, but Frank will check my math.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking that we didn't go above 311. Everybody knows how I feel about that number. And then when I divided that by 2234, it didn't have an impact on the
About
tax.
$45 per student, right? 100,000 divided by 2,234 is $45 a student, and then you divide that by 10,648, and you are going to get that number pretty close to what Christina just said.
So it's pretty, so the tax rate, all the numbers are going to change on this document that we've warned, which can happen from the floor, I'm not saying it can't, but all the numbers will change, and some will change by what appears to be a lot, but then when it floats down to the tax rate on, in Guilford, $100,000 is a big amount of money, but on 50 million.
And then also, so if you were talking about, I remember hearing about 500,000, you're talking there was an $800,000 amount. Whatever that reserve amount is, if that's not going to be able to be used for this 100,000, what is that amount going to be used for? I mean, what is it going to be accessible for? I mean, how is that, I mean, is it going to be accessible for something next budget, or, I mean, I guess that's what is there a way to kind of offset this 100,000 in some other way? I don't know, I remember a couple meetings ago, there was a concern about the Brattleboro, my recollection is, that the Brattleboro residents were concerned about their tax rate going up, and especially since the budget had been warned at a certain amount, and it was what we were talking about is higher than what they approved. And so then when we're talking about just adding some amount in, especially if there was a kind of a discussion that it was going to be offset by something else, I'm concerned about that and the effect that will have.
David?
Yeah, I think if we can just move the reserve fund conversation just away from this whole thing. This came from, as Robin just said, this came from us trying to figure out what to do with our reserve fund in the town meeting. When a former town manager, retired for decades now, asked, what's gonna happen with that? Please let us know. So we tried to figure that out. But, and we talked about wanting to have the 500,000, it's actually, with the 330 that we put in this year to the budget, that 800 came down to 500, and we may have, we'll see what we have for a surplus in August, but I don't think we're running behind this year, we'll have a right surplus. And, so where was I going with that? Oh, so, we wanted to put 100,000 in every year for 5 years, and use that reserve fund that way. And then we thought, well, we can't, we found out we couldn't do that. So for a number of reasons. But, so what we decided to do was to just have it added to the budget. And we said, like, a couple of different times, a couple of different ways, I'm sure I said it at least once at the meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, that if we added $100,000 and we find we're running short of money at the end of the year, well, we've got a reserve fund that we can draw on if a roof caves in or something, and we need it, we can pay for it that way. But I think the primary thing is that this is something that we've been trying to do for a really long time. And like everybody, when it's time to do budgets, you're really carefully planning and looking at things and really hesitant to ask anything more of the administration than they're already doing. And, but we just weren't seeing the progress that we needed to see. And the growing percentage of children of color in our schools and the lack of any role models for them in our schools, it's something that we have to deal with. It has to change. It's a disservice to those kids to present them in the world where they can't be teachers because only white people are teachers. And that's just a minimal part, a small part of or not a small part, but it's just one part of the whole issue. And this is something that the community really strongly supports, and it's many times they really support it. And it's, as everyone has said, it's a really unusual circumstance. And since we're bringing up a pretty big chunk of money into the reserve fund, it seemed pretty reasonable to ask to add something to the budget. The reserve fund would be there if we needed the money, but that's something the budget is really going to make a difference, a really significant difference in our community. A need that the community has talked to us a lot about. But talking about the reserve fund is not the issue. The issue is bringing this to the floor and asking the town to do it so that we can have an effective program.
Sean and then Jody.
I think Brattleboro should be really commended for putting this initiative out there. But as I said at the last meeting, this really is a budgetary thing to take when you're asking the voting public to raise a $50 million budget by $100,000. It's just like, it doesn't rest well with me. Should it be used for what you want it to be used for? Absolutely, absolutely. But I think there must be a different time to fit it in, to make it a budgetary consideration. And this board could certainly make a commitment to do that come October. And it seems like it would be a better financial path.
Emily, did you have your hand up?
I did. But a new question came up too that wasn't on my, so can I ask both? I have two questions and then a comment. So one is, I didn't really understand what you meant, like there's a better time to do this. What would the better time be?
A budgeting time.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
meaning postpone the work around diversity, except for the work that's already ongoing until when it could be approved next March. That's what the only other option would be. Is that the case?
Or maybe the WSESD could use a reserve to, I'm not really sure, because my knowledge of how you actually use the reserve fund, as I said at the last board meeting, I've been sort of schooled by the financial officers in the WSESU, and you need a fund balance for a cushion. As I said in the last meeting, you know, our payroll at BUHS every 2 weeks goes to $500,000. So you need a fund balance to do things that are ongoing. And to start a new program as you present a big budget, and especially this year with it being as big. I mean, does it feel good to me? Absolutely. But is it fiscally responsible way to do it? I'm not so sure.
So that was just I just wanted to clarify that. So, and I guess that'll be up to us or / the voters to decide if it seems fiscally responsible. My second question, then my comment, because I want to make sure I clarify, because I wasn't actually at the Brattleboro meeting where it was voted upon. So, because this is with the supervisory union, or at least Michaela's position is, and therefore a lot of the programming is under that umbrella. Robin, you had said something that it would be essentially all 10 schools are under that umbrella. So even though Brattleboro is proposing this, it could be an opportunity for kind of a really interesting opportunity of the first kind of big programmatic endeavor that this board is actually overseeing that then goes forward. And I think it's a real statement to say that this diversity work that is so integral to Brattleboro, and I'm sure is important to everybody in all the school districts, is kind of the first thing we're taking up as business. Now, I don't know the prioritization, you know, you guys have given to diversity and inclusion in your separate towns. I'm sure it's pretty high, but the resources obviously that can be devoted when you have a smaller school district aren't as high as now that can be devoted. So I just wanted to make that as it's kind of a unique time for us and exciting, even if it does mean that, okay, you know, unfortunately it doesn't have a lot of time for us to all deliberate about it. So I wanted to, that was my comment actually.
I'm going to call on Michaela and then you, Jody. I just want to say, so we fund this now through the WSESU, so this is actually a joint endeavor, already even moved up to the WSESU, so that just added another thought, like, so we're sending this money up to the WSESU from the WSESD. Is that the proposal? Or is it that we're funding it at the WSESD level and we have a different funding stream because diversity?
Funded at the SD side is what we talked about. Because the SD, whatever money that I already have is for SU money. So the $12,000 would include Vernon.
Right.
And the rest of the money would be SD.
So this proposal is to stay with the WSESD, so there'd be a pot of money in the WSESD as well as the WSESU.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Okay.
I confused that a little, but just same meaning, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm good now. So Michaela,
Jody before me or?
She said you first.
She's, yeah, three before Jody.
She's used to me talking a lot. You can go ahead.
I just want to concur with what Emily said. I think that, I mean, whether or not, I don't know what kind of resolution or that you can pass, and that's not my area. But what I do know is that statements go a long way. And when you say something is important, and I've said at every meeting that I've been to, is that follow the money and show, that's what tells you what's important. And so if the SD board is about to approve $1 million for the field and whatever else, it's like, this is important too. And so saying that it's important and showing what you spend your money on is crucial, I think. And it impacts everyone. I mean, look at this room. Who's represented in this room? Whose families are represented in this room? And how do we show that it's important, that all kids are important in our everyday work? And this is for all kids. It's not just for the kids who are historically marginalized. It's for everyone. It's very important. And so the idea, because it's a unique year, things are not happening exactly the way they're supposed to. And I know for some people are less flexible than others. In my job, you have to be like Gumby, because ain't nothing gonna work how you want it to work. You show up, you don't know what you're gonna get. And that's part of it. And that's part of being, those of us who work with children, you know, that's part of being with children. That's the beauty of it, is that when you show up, and those of us who have children at home, you don't know what you're gonna get. So in that way, I've learned to be flexible, and some of you in your other occupations maybe are less flexible, but that isn't really important to me. And so I don't think that it has to be left just to you. It could be left to the people, the voters. And it's okay if they vote it down, we'll all live, but it's important to bring forth what's important to us. Like if I sat down, time someone told me no, I wouldn't be sitting here, because people tell me no all the time. All the time, it's constant. No, you can't do that. No, I don't think that's appropriate. No, I don't think that's okay. Don't let the students do that. So I don't accept no for an answer, ever. And there's always a way, and I think that it's okay that it's not the ideal way, but and if you don't feel comfortable voting for it, that's okay, but we can leave it to the voters to say no, and they have to face who they're saying no to and why.
I just would like to clarify that my concern lies in keeping everybody here out of trouble as chair of the board, so it's not just what I feel like I can't do, it's just a feeling that.
Oh, I'm talking about the agenda thing.
So that was my concern there. It was not a question of saying no, it was a question of like, oh, I didn't understand, I have made an error in the agenda.
Right, when I saw the agenda, I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
But no, but that's not what I'm talking about. Okay. I understand that. I'm just saying that there are processes, but bureaucracy can be helpful, but it can also be a hindrance to getting things done. And like this is a great time to make a push. Like we have another position. So then the work that we're able to do will be more. Either way, we'll make it happen with or without the money. But money is always helpful. It's a useful tool, and that's all it is a tool.
Thank you, Michaela. Now, Jody.
Now I can talk, okay. First of all, you know, I agree with what everybody's saying to a point. I agree with Sean very much so that it should be a budgetary item. I'm concerned with what David said is a kind of a different idea of what this is going to be about than what Michaela is saying, because I don't see where $100,000 is going to help us get people of color in the schools. I think that's at the direction of our superintendent and our people in the central office, and to be able to get people of color. And I don't think that doesn't cost $100,000. And I think it's very necessary for the kids to have people of color here that represent them. You know,
that's not what the money's for, but.
No, I know. See, I'm getting two different ideas of what the money's for, so.
Well, let me tell you, Jody, like, if you're gonna invite people of color to your schools to be teachers, and you want them to stay, you have to be ready for them. So having people of color come is not just about numbers of people coming in. It's also about how do we create an environment that allows people of color to be included and flourish and thrive. And that is our first order of business. And we're not there yet. So it's not about just getting people to come here. That doesn't, you know, we can go through, like a lot of things don't cost $100,000, and maybe all the money won't be spent, maybe it will, but we need to be ready. We need to understand racial justice. We need to feel comfortable talking about race. We need to feel comfortable calling our families of color on the phone and inviting them personally to things. We need to do that. There's stuff that we need to do. This isn't about anyone else. This is about our work to make sure that our environment is that welcoming to all kids. And right now, it just isn't. And that's the truth. And so we get kids in the high school, and they're done. At the end of the year, there were kids I couldn't talk into a classroom. That doesn't happen in 1 year. That's from years growing up here. And one kid just sat and told me, he was like, he's like, I don't have excuses. He's like, but right now I can't. Like, he's like, I'm tired. He's like, I haven't had, and this is a kid. I haven't had one teacher around here that's looked like me. My whole life. But are we ready to support those teachers?
Well, it's a whole community thing anyway.
So,
And that's what that money is for.
I just wanted to say it's a large amount of money to add to the budget at this point. That was another thing that I wanted to say in the process. Yeah, I think I've got all my points. I would love to see more staff. I'd love to see more people of color in town. I just have been to 2 communities in Canada, on opposite ends of Canada, that are so integrated with different people, you don't even notice one person or another as a different color or a different race. And we're far from that, and we're going to be far from that. So it needs to be on the select board's bit, it needs to be on the school bit, it needs to be the whole community here. And I know we've talked about that in group. We need to have the community for everybody here. So I don't know. I think the budgetary thing's the way to go myself, and not now.
okay, Miss Kelly has raised her hand. I think maybe we have a lot of business left. This is our first agenda item, people, and I'm gonna have a lot of cranky board members, and people are leaving and going on vacation. So in order to make sure anybody shows up on the 25th and doesn't quit this board, I really want to bring this discussion to a conclusion, but I have real concerns about how I have warned this, and if we can take action as a board or just some advisory action, what the thought is. I'm phoning a friend here on kind of open meeting law and agenda warnings and what we can do, because I have not adequately addressed this and what the
One thing is, we know we can't change the warning that's already published, so.
right, I mean the warning here, that was.
Yeah, but I think that was David's motion, is not to change the warning, but to ask this board if they were willing to endorse an amendment on the June 25th. And as it relates to your concern about this agenda, Christina,
Yeah.
I think it's all germane to the way in which this is warned, in that you're not committing expenditure of funds in this discussion. You're entertaining whether to or not to endorse a amendment that sounds like is going to come from representatives of the Brattleboro Town School Board on June 25th. And David's question was, does this board want to take a position on that, or do we want to just wait until June 25th? And so as a legal matter around this warning and the way this meeting is being conducted, I don't think you're in any kind of difficulty.
Okay.
I just want to 2 points, and I think I agree with that it's a budgetary thing, but I would feel much more comfortable with this figure if and it could be that I know that I was here at okay, I'm gonna get the letters wrong. I think I was here at a WSESU meeting in which there was a presentation that Michaela made, and so I think that's the only presentation that I have seen. So I think I would feel more comfortable with the number if I had some idea of how this money was going to be spent. I mean, she made a lot of really good points, but I mean, understanding okay. So I think that's
I guess I have a clarifying question / comment. I have that, but I just got, what was I gonna ask? Oh, so I know one comment before was if it was taken from the fund balance, which we know it's not being taken from the fund balance. But the case is, if it was being taken from the fund balance, it just means that we would be bringing less fund balance to the shared school district. So either way, I mean, I hope we don't get hung up on, oh, well, you would have taken it before, which, if the fund balance was set up differently, we could have, because it really doesn't make a difference. right? I mean, makes a difference because it does change the tax rate a little bit in this cycle, but it means you have less money to work with in the future. So I guess I just don't want to get hung up on when we do this and where it comes from, because we're now a merged district. So whatever we took previous to merging, if we took it for a program like the school forest, or we took it for something else, that just means we all have less money to work with now. So neither right nor wrong, just that's how it is.
That is very true, but speaking as the person that is probably going to present a lot of the budget on June 25th, it's already extremely confusing. So
Yeah.
just part of my I wish it was in a fund balance. Maybe that's why I keep clinging to the fund balance that's written on all the documents, because that would be very clear. It's not happening here on these already confusing pages, so that that's a logistical issue and not an emotional, but just this budget has to pass on June 25th. Nothing's happening come July 1 if this budget doesn't pass. And so doing anything that might put that at risk from my perspective right now, that's job one for us right now. So just anything that confuses it, or, so that is why it only makes a difference to me right now. And is that this has been warned, and now we're just changing it. So that's why I wish it were a fund balance from my perspective.
I know we're trying to bring this part of the meeting to a close, but I just want to say one thing about the comments that people have made, that this is much more correct for it to come during the budgeting season and probably be spent at the SU level is true, and I really hope that is what happens for the FY21 budget. But I think that it's worth doing something unusual if it means that we can start addressing this now, instead of saying, let's wait one more year and then start fixing these deficits. So it is really unusual, and you guys are right, this isn't the right way to do it. This is kind of like going around the right way and slipping it in at the last minute. But it's because it is so important that a year of waiting to be able to have the money to put behind these initiatives is a really long time in the life of a child. And I know that, yes, it is Lyle's job to oversee all of this, but if it was within her sole power, it would already have happened. If there was a way to do it without spending any money, it would already have happened. All of this is, as you said, Jody, it's a community effort, and community effort cannot happen without any money. There has to be money to pay people to spend time to do the thing. And in this case, there is some really good details in the proposal about how Michaela sees going about recruiting additional staff, and that is just one piece of this. It's not the whole thing. But I do think there is a worthwhile reason to consider doing an unusually timed amendment to the budget here. And I just want to point out, Christina, that even though, yes, it does seem frightening to think like, well, what if people don't vote for the budget? But in the way that the meeting will go, they would first vote on this amendment, yes or no. And if people voted yes, we want to amend the budget this way, then I think it would be pretty logical to assume that, to assume that those same people that passed the amendment would also pass the budget. So I don't think that is something that's going to tank the budget if it passes.
Ann.
It has been my observation that marginalized people are regularly asked to wait. Sometime in the future we'll solve their problems. And in the meantime, these other problems that we have to face somehow prevent us from even trying. I believe that the momentum exists throughout most, if not all, of our towns at this point to address these issues, and Robin is absolutely right, we can't do it for free. I would like to say out loud and quite clearly that I supporting a motion from the floor to fund this office and to make steps now, because people care now, and they're too darn confused to stop us now.
An interesting point. So I really want, can you limit yourselves to like 30 seconds so we can move forward, because really, I'm leaving at 5 tomorrow, so I'm gonna start getting really crabby. So Jamie.
Oh, you're. Reserve funds coming in from Brattleboro is what number? To lower the tax rate?
330,000.
Well, it's for some purpose, there's no.
But it's just there. And then the other question is, what's the double tax jeopardy thing we're always afraid of?
18,311 this year.
Are we below it with this 100,000?
We're still below it with this.
Okay. And then the last thing is, we can't change any warning, like you couldn't amend a warning?
You can do anything from the floor, but this has gone out to the vote.
Okay, but you can't just like, be like, here's an update 48 hours before?
No.
That can't happen?
No,
Okay.
this is by statute forever, no.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then the last thing was, I support Ann Beekman's statement, and I support Michaela Sims as a leader in our region, and I look forward to us, as Michaela says, being flexible and being timely. So I know in Putney, we are getting excited. The one thing that's gonna turn people out on the 25th will be this. And people in every town are getting excited and organizing to be there on the 25th. And I couldn't have done that for anything else other than this.
David, I'll let you give the last, okay, well, okay. Sean, I'll let you give the last word.
I'm gonna call a question on my question.
Okay, we have to have a vote to call the question. Or you could amend that and just let Sean have his last word, because that was the last word. Or you
If
could
you're gonna
rescind that.
enforce the last word, absolutely.
I'm gonna enforce the last
Okay.
word.
I withdraw my call on the
So
question.
30 seconds on that, it'll be faster than that.
Yeah, no, it's fine, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get you out of here.
I can talk?
Yes.
Okay. It puts me personally in a very awkward position. When I was a kid, I went to the March on Washington where Dr. Martin Luther King did an I Have a Dream speech. I've been interested in, as my family has, always, my whole life, in social justice. I went to a high school, and my roommate was from Virginia because his school had been closed by the governor of Virginia, and my school took him in, so it was my opportunity to have somebody not of my race as a roommate in high school. So the idea, but to go back, we started making budgets in October. And I think budgets are extremely important. And to all of a sudden have a altruistic, feel-good thing at the end, if it goes against the budgetary business, I'm not comfortable with it. And I don't think, I wouldn't be comfortable in raising a $50 million budget by 100,000 within the last week of the budget presentation. So that's all.
So, there we have it. Are we ready to vote on, David, can you restate your motion? for those of
Yeah,
us-
I've actually
It's been about an
asked to
hour
read
now.
it back. The WSESD supports a motion to raise the budget by $100,000 to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice. And the motion on the floor will have the numbers, because we have to do that. So you're saying basically we support that effort.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion to increase the budget by $100,000 to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions?
Nay.
You're not a voting
What are
member.
you voting for, Judy?
Nice try, you're not a voting member. So-
Oh, I'm not a voting member. I've been a voting member for so long, I can't vote.
It's late, it's not that late, Jody.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
So the
Open
ayes
seat,
appear,
double
the ayes
check.
appear
No,
to
it's not.
have
Got
it.
somebody
The
running.
ayes do have it. The ayes have it, the motion passes. I would like to ask that if this document could be amended to actually reflect what is being asked for, because this document talks about a fund, it talks about $70,000, so, and it talks about a WSESU, so all these questions have come up and been clarified, and I guess it points to my concern about things that happen very quickly, because the document I have underscores the warning that I had, and it would be really, if we're gonna go forward as a board and do something, I would really appreciate the support of having the documentation available to people that is clear and explains to people that it's a WSESD, it's $100,000, and we're hoping to fund it over 5 years, but of course we can't find budgeting for future boards, so it's really $100,000 and what it's going to be used for, because that has been a lot of the source of the confusion. So if we could just get things tightened up so that when we're going in there, this very, very messy, I mean, we're
So
all
it shouldn't
Gumby.
say fund.
We're all Gumby. It shouldn't say fund.
Right, this is from before. When
No, I understand, but that's
Yeah.
what I walked out with, and
Yeah,
it says
yeah.
350 for 5 years, and
So I can change it.
and it's, so that's what I'm looking for in WSESD, so that we understand where the money's flowing to, because
Okay.
the ask was for WSESD. So it would be great if some board members with a board member focus could sort of maybe vet it and make sure it's something that it's clear from what's going forward to voters as well, like that it has the focus on the ground as well as the focus from a governance standpoint, so that if we're gonna hand something out to people, that everybody is on the same page and understanding, because it
And
makes
something else
conversations.
On Tuesday.
You would hand it to them at the door?
Yeah.
We could add that as a supplement, yeah.
Okay. Got it.
For the visual learners among us,
Yes.
for those with diverse learning styles. Such as myself would be
It
very
also
helpful.
saves a
I
lot
do
of
a dance
questions.
too, that helps.
Yes,
I
Jane.
volunteer as a part of the communications committee with David and Emily to help with that process.
Excellent, fabulous. I look forward to your product. Yes, Kelly.
I'd like to see more of a breakdown of how this money was being handed over. I mean, this is a great and kind of in theory and what their ideological thoughts are, but how is the money actually breakdown of that? That's what I'm actually looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion in terms of the concern people have that it hasn't gone through a budgeting process, that, you know, it would make us all feel more comfortable if it's a little clearer from a presentation point when we go in front of a community where we haven't put it in here, so that we are 110% crisp on our presentation when we're asking the public to be Gumbies beyond belief, because this is already asking a lot of people to understand and board members to present. So that would be great if the communications committee could work on that. I'm sure you're hearing me, Jamie, because you have rapt attention, so thank you for that.
I'm already prepping.
Okay, great. Fabulous.
I heard what you said though, and I was writing notes.
I know, I'm just, I can't, yes, Sean?
Now that this has passed and the
Yes.
resolution will be presented, I think it's important to realize that as a board, you're doing something as a board. So it doesn't matter whether individuals voted yes or no. This is what the board presents.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so.
It's not, well, I would love to let that go, but, I don't think that that's what it means to be on. You don't have to just.
Don't talk.
Okay, you're right.
That's,
Yeah.
don't undo the work of the board. I mean, it's like we're
Yeah.
supporting the will of the board.
The
Sean,
statement will be that this is what the
Thank
board
you.
is doing.
Safe travels.
I think Sean is actually supporting, even, you know, no matter what the vote was, this has been the will of the board, and the board will work towards this resolution as a.
Yeah, but I think if people have issues and concerns about it, that we need to feel free to express those concerns. I certainly would if I were in the minority on that.
Yes.
Not, I wouldn't be saying you're
I
off the
gotcha,
people.
I gotcha now. Okay, thank you for that, David.
Yeah, we can't
I'm
give
with you.
away our free speech.
No, I'm not asking that of anybody.
I'm not
even
either,
though he's-
and I don't think Sean is, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, item 2 on unfinished business. Okay, we're gonna,
No, we're at 2?
yeah, B. Live broadcast, I have not heard back from last, I was delayed in emailing her, I've had email massive troubles, so apparently my email didn't send out, so I didn't send it out till today, so I know that we can't do like a live voting on a live broadcast, because I'd have to do roll call votes on stuff, so like special meetings can't be live broadcast and have participation, but for questions they could be. But I have not gotten data on that, so good, we can move through that very quickly. The article.
Christina?
Yes, sorry.
Vlasta was not in today.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Usually she gets right back to me, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So I will have that for you on the 25th, assuming we connect sometime between then and now. Item C, under unfinished business, the article amendment update. It has been very busy at the WSSU. I did not take more of Lyle's time for us to have a meeting, and getting the amendment committee together was nearly impossible in these last few days of school. So we are hoping to meet early next week, and we will bring the results, some update from our work, to our next scheduled meeting. Which is, so I'm gonna have to call a meeting for right before the 25th, for the budget vote, like 6:30, have a quick meeting. So I don't think we'll be doing the whole laundry list of stuff. So that's our last item of business for those who are still standing, will be to schedule our next meetings. So I don't think I will do that on the 25th, because we're just getting a few things done that have to get done at that meeting to move forward. Leadership Council policy discussion. We lost David.
No, he'll be back.
Sorry?
He'll be back.
I've lost everybody.
I could actually make a motion to that, what the heck?
Sure.
All right, I make a motion that the WSESD.
WSESD.
Yeah, thank you. I almost said the BUHS. So, that we form leadership councils with the, as a policy, and that it is established as soon as possible.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Discussion. Jamie.
I have asked at the last couple Putney Town School Board meetings about our plan for the fall and how we're going to address leadership councils, because I would like to be on them, or on Putney's. And one of the things that has come up for me is the formlessness of it in its current rendition. And that if this policy passes, my hope would be that it would become more defined before it's passed along to the 10 schools, because the interpretation will be the end of us. And I am concerned that I'm already seeing some interpretations that seem to be outside of, I think it needs more support. And so one of the recommendations I was going to make was based off of a conversation I had prior to coming here, that it be defined in its number of individuals that are on it, and more clarity about the types of folks that are on it and the ratios of those folks. So I just want to name that if you're doing a broad policy vote, I'd like to have an understanding that there will be clarity on its path.
Thank you, Jamie. Sean?
But just so my motion was not misunderstood, my motion was just to say that this board will establish leadership councils by a local board policy.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about
What
that local board policy would look like.
Yeah.
It's just that we will establish leadership councils within a local board policy.
So,
Within local board policy?
so the local board policy being WSESD. So that would be, WSESD is now the local board, not the local schools. So he's just saying we will create a policy, not give the policy, so.
Yeah, got it.
Local's different now.
Okay, got it. I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, so these nuts and bolts pieces seem like it would be good to have them in the policy that we create based on Sean's motion, to have a little more structure around them and not just throw it to the wind because of a specific intention for those leadership.
We're not going to do that tonight.
But we're not going to do that tonight.
No.
So we're just voting on authorizing the amendment policy committee that we combined last time to work on a leadership council policy. Any further discussion? All those in favor of having the amendment and policy committee create a leadership council policy to bring to the board for review? Please signify. Would that be a reasonable restatement of your motion?
I'm sorry, I kind of lost it for a minute.
I know, it's getting late. To authorize the policy and amendment committee to create a leadership policy to bring to the board for review.
That is right.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Committee needs. We really have to get, we have a communications committee. We have an amendment legal committee. We really need to get SU representatives because if something happens come July 1, we don't have SU representation, and the SU, well, I'll be working this summer. So we need to have an SU board to back her up. So we need 4. I just got to the next part. 1 from each community to volunteer to serve as an SU representative. I'm taking nominations, I guess, so now's the time to speak quickly.
I'll do it.
Okay. Oh, you're volunteering?
Yeah.
So,
Emily's got better stuff.
You've got Tim over there.
Yeah, I'll do it too.
okay, so yeah, I'd rather do volunteering in this situation because it's just whoever raises their hand first that makes the motion carry, since there's only 2 from each. So we have David, we have Tim. They're duking it out down in Guilford. Why I laughed is because I realized why I laughed is I was like 1 from each town.
That's why I laughed.
I was going to make a big speech how I'm not going to do SU board because I feel like it's too much in the power of one person. So
You can give it to the new board member.
Well, I'm not going to do it before he joins. So it's me.
At least we have a start. We have quorum.
We have quorum now. That's true. So you 2 will duke it out and figure that out. Thank you, Kelly. We don't meet that often. 4 times a year. So.
I thought the hope was to meet more.
Well, it's not this
But
year.
on a whole group.
So any extra, we burned the fat off this organization this year, so we're not looking to do more of anything. I think we have really what we need to go forward for the summer with committees, so I think I'm going to table the rest of the committee discussion until we have the seat filled, so that we can make sure that for these other kind of more fun committees, honestly, we make sure that our other Dummerston board member is available to be part of the discussion and volunteer as well.
When you said table, but you said we're okay for the summer, so when was this person going to be joining? Summer makes it sound like
That's my next item of business.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to make sure we had SU representation because we're not going to, something could happen July 1, so. And you might have an emergency SU meeting. It doesn't ever happen, but just, of course it would if we didn't have it. So that's my nerdy quality coming out. Moving on to new business. So the Dummerston resident school director position has had 1 applicant. Hooray. That application by, I don't know who decided this. It's not statute, it's by I don't know. I don't even know how policies are coming at us from the state at this point, but it goes to the Dummerston Select Board to approve the candidate, select from the pool of candidates, the candidate. So I suggested that maybe, since it was only 1 candidate, could we just approve the candidacy tonight, but the Select Board wants to do their due diligence and interview the candidate. Hopefully they're going to do that tomorrow night so that we will be able to install that resident school director next week. So that is something I would put on for the 25th, assuming that the Select Board can sort through the huge pool of applicants, interview them all, and make a selection. So that is where we stand. I hope that seat will be filled June 25th, because by statute, we're supposed to have it filled in 30 days, which is really tricky if you're going to have it approved by a select board and find candidates. So, yes, Mr. Scott.
I just wanted to suggest a possible alternative, because I looked this afternoon and I could not find the statute. It wasn't in the SU statutes and it wasn't in the school district statutes, so it must have been vacancies or something in the elections for statute where it talked about doing this. And I remember very clearly because I looked several times to see if it said that the select board recommends, and I'm really certain that it didn't say that. That they were to collect them because it was from the town, not a board that was multi-town. But that they really didn't have, it wasn't like the superintendent brings recommendations to the board. So I would, just in case I'm right, we might act tonight to take action to assign him to the board pending, or just some way to get it so that he's on.
I think I'd like to clarify the situation. I don't see a point in causing any more ruckus between municipalities right now, because it is a one person, that's my opinion, as the other Dummerston representative, is there's only one person. So if we felt if we felt there was an issue with choosing, I feel like it's just a perfunctory thing, it's one meeting versus the other, and we're almost done. He's not here tonight, so I just don't see the practical nature of it, but if you want to make a motion, we can have a discussion.
No.
Try to, okay. Yes, Kelly.
So if, let's say they interview and select the person, what is it that this board actually has to do for that person to be installed?
Select and vote.
We will approve. They don't, from my reading of it, and as David said, this is different from any other way that you appoint board members. From my reading of it, they need to have input. They can interview, like they're going to do apparently, interview the person, they just need to have input. And then this board is the body that approves and actually decides.
So it would just be a vote.
We vote.
So, is that select board going to be meeting before next Tuesday?
So tomorrow night, they're meeting.
So we could,
by June 25th, I hope that we can.
that person could be.
We could vote that person.
Subtly invited to the meeting,
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure, and then we could just vote and then.
Right, yes. That's my intention, to have them in there June 25th, and there for all the budgetary fun. While we're moving, I'm moving on to item B, the bond bank resolution. You're up, Frank.
So we talked about deferring that to a future meeting?
Right.
So, I'm good with that?
Okay, great.
And while I have a moment, do you mind if I
Go for it.
go home?
Her attention.
You didn't bring your pot with you?
No, I got a
You
heavy.
spoke quickly tonight, you were very helpful. Yes, you may go home, as long as nobody else has a need for Frank with the budget preparation.
We could send him out for pizza.
Budget preparation, which is our next item. Is there anything, I think getting this piece so that people can read that and understand would be helpful. Is there anything from a Frank standpoint before he takes his leave? Jamie?
The only question I had was for the Franzes of the world who are going to show up and say, don't you let me vote on a budget until you do one of those summary pages with the 100,000 included. So I just didn't know if there was any way to do a summary page with the 100,000 included, so that when people poke the beast, they see everything that you can calculate in your brain.
Oh, I have a smartphone, I can't calculate that.
Whatever happened there. So I was just wondering that in the discussion.
Especially to make sure we get the numbers right when it comes to the actual dollar figure, because a couple pennies one way or the other, we have to get that number right. So I know Frank would get that to us as well. So I think that's all we need Frank for, right?
So
Head nodding?
That doesn't need to be moved then?
No, no.
Very good.
Speaking of motions, we have the form where people make the motions. I'll pass it around. We usually share that joy. Somebody gets to move spending $50 million, don't they? Yes. So I'll pass it around. There's probably more of us than there are motions. That's refreshing. So if you'd like to sign up for a motion so that can get back so it goes smoothly on the 25th. We have childcare. Anything that came from the conversation tonight that we need to rethink about our presentation, or any of the information here to make sure it goes crisply on the 25th?
We'll do a similar presentation.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think it went well. Yeah, right, yeah, I'm taking names on the articles, so whichever one you want to read.
Okay.
Yes, Kelly?
You know, it was helpful when people were saying this page and this page and this page, so maybe it's something, maybe it's just me, but maybe something, if you're looking for all of Guilford, if you're looking for all of Putney, all of, I don't know if there's something, if he's doing a summary, maybe on part of that, it can just be sort of a reference. You know, if you're looking for all of these, sort of these pages that have to do with Putney, that have, does
So
that
the
make?
table of contents does,
It does
you know,
say
it
it
does,
that, yeah.
it does give you a pretty good summary of what's in the report, what page number.
But when you're explaining it, I think is what Kelly's
So-
saying.
When you're explaining it, so they can flip, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just, it's gonna be confusing either way, I don't know. I was just trying to think of a way that might be.
But I think maybe I could do a better job. I think I did better this time than last time, saying, okay, on page 15, but then we got talking about something and I pulled all my pens out that was holding all the places, but directing people to the pages to say, okay, Brattleboro Town is starting on page 14 and then the following pages support that budget. So perhaps in presentation, when I'm calling on people, I can do a better job in showing people the page and walking through a little more cleanly. Maybe that would help. Versus another piece of paper. So I'm seeing nodding. Thank you, Janie. And Jamie.
The only addition is when there isn't a row number to read from, as there are in some pages, people get caught, for those of us who do not understand budgets like this, you get caught looking, and so you finally said second paragraph or third something, and so just think from it layman's terms, because in my line, I was thinking of rows, so fifth row down. It just helps.
Okay.
Just anything in there, your eyes can track faster. So I think that helps.
Is there a way to project it? Would that be?
It's a big room though.
And it's gonna be sunny.
Um,
I'm predicting
Wait a
sunny
minute.
weather.
And the numbers are gonna be really small too.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to see it.
I don't think, it's too big a room, I'm afraid. It's a good idea though. I like,
So taking the time to identify words on the page.
just going more slowly and we'll put Jody out in the audience. She's now well versed at this.
Maybe we need to have people, you know how you have the mic? We need to
Right.
have people in the audience going and pointing, helping them.
Yeah. It's a good idea. Excellent. Thank you, Frank.
And you are gonna have microphones at your table, I hope.
Oh, yeah. Soon, I don't know, soon.
We're not gonna be up on stage.
I don't have any idea the setup. I suspect it'll be just like
Well,
last week.
who decide, who
We
tells?
just tell them how to set it up, but generally they have us up so they can see us.
Rick, is that up to you? No, because we had a big conversation about that for town meeting 2 years ago and then this year as well about, people being up. It's actually the meeting of the town or of the district and we're just there to answer questions and to be in an elevated status and all that.
It's up to you guys, however you want it set up. I will have it
Does
set up.
anyone want any of these reports before I take them for the handout? Go set.
I think if we stand and deliver when we're talking, then that kind of resolves that issue of people can see who's talking and your voice doesn't go down. So as long as we're all willing to stand and deliver, I think that sort of is a good meeting, a good compromise of making sure people can see and hear. Yes, Jody?
I think that being up on a platform, a little bit of a platform is a plus for people in the audience because it's it's a flat room, it's not an auditorium or anything, and you can't see. If you've got somebody, there's nobody big in here, but if you've got somebody in front of you, you're not going to be able to see you, Christina.
So, but if I'm standing, I'm not
I
that
think even if you're
short.
standing, you're that short. That's
Maybe
just-
we could have like a little step stool at the podium for short people like me.
No, I think it may be better to just have them put the dais up and be up there. It's an issue in Brattleboro and it's symbolic, but at this point, it's not worth hassling. We have public engagement issues bigger than that.
Yeah.
Well, I know in Dummerston town meeting, it's hard sitting in the gym and looking at the people up front that are just on the flat.
All right, so we've decided we're elevating only for the benefit of people being able to see and hear what is going on and not creating elevated status in any way, shape, or form. Okay, policies. We have adoption of our conflict of interest policy as well as F23, really?
Yes, that's the hazing, harassment, and bullying.
Oh, I thought it was H something. Oh, that was
F20.
F23. I would entertain a motion to adopt policies B3, conflict of interest.
Can I make a suggestion, possibly? I brought the policy manual from the Brattleboro Union High School Board. It's not current anymore because they're all online, but there are a lot of policies. They've all been vetted. The administrators depend on them, the teachers depend on them, the students depend on them. So I would say that as a board, one thing that we could do would be to just adopt the policies in the schools, which would cover everything, and then at our leisure, when we don't have a million things to do, we could go through and look at the policies. I mean, I was on this planning and policy committee for years, and, they're carefully done.
Yeah, no, we talked about doing this in the other meeting, that we're just going to adopt, but this F23 is new and it's not in that book. And the conflict of interest, we had to make sure we adopted that. So we just haven't had time between getting the budget warrant to have that discussion, but I think that's what I really think we should. I mean, some modification of that, because some of those apply to the high school, so there has to be a
But
little
even
more.
so, the high school needs local board policy.
And the high school probably more than the others, because there are, not all of them are specific to high school, but there are issues that the high school has to deal with on a much more regular basis than any of the K6, K8 schools have had to pre-K.
I think that has to be a really top priority once we get this budget passed, is having policies in place for schools that we've adopted, and there's no other way to do it, really. But but that one doesn't have the F23. That has to be done now, so we have to get that one through. And then
Well, we have a prevention of harassment.
it's a mandatory policy that has to be updated, that we're tardy in getting done. So that one in there needs to be updated. So that's why
Oh,
we're
I see what you're
adopting
saying.
it.
Yeah, okay.
The state changed a word in paragraph 2 or something, but it's actually pretty substantially changed from the original policy. So,
Okay.
so I'm back to entertaining a motion I could do them as a slate. Policy B3.
I would make a motion that we adopt B3 and F23.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving policies B3 and F23, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions? The ayes have it, the motion passes, the policies have been adopted. Congratulations, you have a new policy. So yes, we can now sign the Code of Ethics pledge that was part of that we made the changes to, so I will pass that along. Oh,
Just put my eye
So-
on it to sign the policy.
No.
It's not gonna work.
Try.
She's stuck outside.
so we can talk, we have to have the first part of the discussion. I said probably not before 9:30, so.
Okay, did she have your text?
I know the door's locked, so
Yeah.
is someone stuck outside?
Maybe.
We're wondering, and if Frank went out the other
Yeah,
way, he goes out the back way.
I can go.
Who's
Can you
missing?
go check?
Somebody's coming for
A
one of the
family wanted to come for
family.
possible, she has my email, so let me just make
I'll
sure
go down
she
and
has
look.
your email. I don't have an email, but
But were they coming this late? Because the door's been locked since 7.
Yes, they're coming.
well, I said come, I was making a guesstimate, and I said probably not before 9:15, 9:30.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
Do you think
I know
they're
you
coming?
people.
You're a genius.
Well, I've been around the rodeo a few times. So, the default articles, do you have those? I have them in my big pile. So, let me preface this discussion with a little bit of background, is that when we were looking at a merger that communities were voting on, one of the things that was talked about at great length as an advantage for merger was the ability for students to attend alternate schools. And there was a lot of effort, time, language floated around and discussion with people in the community about how we could offer a school choice, a limited school option within the public schools that exist. Not school choice, private school choice, that's a different thing, I'm not talking about that. So with the forced merger, there has been a lot of discussions in towns, and especially among people that were tuned in to merger, have said, oh, merger, great, we're all one school, my child can attend any school in the WSESD. And that has created a bunch of questions, and some people have had just said, oh, great, my kid's gonna go to school Y next year, but this is not exactly the case that's been handed down in the default articles. And if you worked on the AGS, we were working on ways to make that happen in other ways. Thank you, Lyle. So Article 3 of our default articles is handed down low from the agency, State Board of Education, says that in the academic years 2019-2020 and 2021, each student in the grades for which the new union district operates multiple school buildings will attend the school that a student residing in that town would have attended in academic year 2018-2019. Provided, however, that a new union district board may grant a parent's or guardian's request for student enrollment in a different school operated by the new union district based on individual student circumstances and the superintendent's determination of the school's capacity to serve the child. So it falls under so as I've written back to parents, I have said, well, no, it's not guaranteed. In fact, it's kind of prohibited. And so there has to be some concern about the school's capacity to serve the child based on the superintendent's determination. So I thought it would be helpful for the board and for Lyle. I don't think we're ready to create an amendment to this agreement before the start of the school year, and frankly, people would really like to know soon if some of these requests are being granted, and some of them may fall under that category of a special circumstance where a child needs to be served, and some may not. So people want to know where their child, especially in case of a kindergartner, so they can go to teddy bear teas and events like that. So Lyle and I have been talking back and forth as these requests have come through the ether and come out with some sort of ideas to start the conversation about what extenuating circumstances might be. And I don't want to limit discussion, even given the hour, but I also want to sort of frame that we're understanding our obligation under these default articles to make sure we've defined what extenuating circumstances are. And the concern, I want to actually further back up that a concern that I've heard from multiple board members is that since we cannot provide transportation, and we have not budgeted for transportation, we cannot drive children to whatever school they want to attend, creating a program where everybody can choose a school, if we're not providing transportation, would make it very difficult for lots of families to be able to avail themselves of those opportunities. So in order to increase equity, providing school choice to only people that have the means to drive their kids, if a child in Putney wanted to go to Guilford or vice versa, that is really selecting for people that have the time, the vehicles, and the wherewithal to drive their child from Putney to Guilford and back, and with everything else going on. And when you consider many people have multiple children, how much that really winnows out the ability of everyone in our community to avail themselves of an opportunity. So have I done a good job in your mind sort of presenting, because you were with me on the AGS, these are kind of all the issues that surrounded public school choice or restructuring of grades. So the three ideas that we had for offering school choice, offering to allow a student to attend a school that is not the school they would have attended during this past school year ending today, would be if there were concerns that the school could not adequately serve the child based on the superintendent's evaluation. Perhaps there is a program that's better for a kid and a kid is having a lot of trouble. If there is, I think Rebecca Holcomb said this early on, sometimes a school is just not working out for a child. And we have dealt with these situations within our districts. It's been happening all along. If a child isn't working out in a school, they have gone and attended another school. So I know we've worked that out with other towns in order to make sure that that child is served because that student could not work out in that school. The second time we would consider, and I'm not sure this meets the qualification, but with the Putney's incoming second grade, when there are 28 students, to offer choice to maybe lower the student population as an opportunity to say, would you be interested in attending a different school so that we wouldn't have to hire another teacher? That would be another opportunity. I'm not sure it meets the criteria that the state has set out. And the other criteria that we considered was some schools have policies that teachers can bring their children to the school they teach in as a benefit. Those policies are gone now, and we can consider, although I don't know how we can do this, I've got to think through the logistics of that, but we could consider extending that policy as a benefit to all staff within the WSESU, that if you wanted your child to attend the school you taught in, or perhaps even not attend the school you teach in, if it's a resident district, that we would consider offering those opportunities. Or any others that come from this group at 9:30 at night. Yes, Jody?
I want to caution the board, watching what's gone on in Wyndham Central, that be very careful when you get to doing this or changing this, because they depleted Jamaica by having school choice. And that's one way to get to close the schools, and without actually closing this, without actually forcing closing. So just to be cautious.
I think it is an important charge of this board to make sure that our schools are offering, are equitable and offering equitable educations, which is the first, stop gap of depleting a school. Because schools will have unique flavor, but we make sure that each school is offering something great. But we're not even there yet. That does not happen in this summer.
When you start opening the door here for anything, you have to look at the unintended consequences.
Yes.
So.
Thank you, Jody.
I don't recall any in-depth conversation here. Is there a conversation going on about offering just blanket choice for anybody to choose where the kids go?
That was, because it was part of the original Articles of Agreement, to have some sort of limited choice in there, and how that got into the community, people aren't reading.
That's very limited choice.
That was very limited choice, right? But how that went out into the community was, great, we're all one district. I've had many conversations from people in the public, like, we can go to any school we want now, yeah. So.
Never been true in Brattleboro, we have 3 schools.
Right, I think maybe those questions haven't come in Brattleboro quite as much because you're used to having multiple schools. Those questions have come from the hinterlands more, where it's like, oh, excellent, I want that 6th grade teacher in that school, and I want the 7th grade, and not understanding the logistical piece behind it, so, yeah. Yes, Jamie?
Just 2 concerns. One is if the 8 of you are going to be hearing all of these requests once this happens, and what that will do to the agendas of these meetings. And the second is the 3 choices that you named seem to me to be really concerning, and it is school choice. that these are not limitations, that these are the beginning of offering the school choice that will deplete the schools. And so by creating those, what seem like limited pathways, it actually begins the process. And so there's no small undertaking that you are beginning by even proposing those three choices.
So the three choices were based on what's been historically done. So just in terms of a jumping off point about what we would consider extenuating circumstances, although as I read through that, I think some of the ideas I had of things we've done historically are not like individual student circumstances. I don't know how
What does that mean?
what does that mean?
Yeah.
That the parent is in the school and that makes it easier on the parent, but that could be said of many things. So yeah, this is a conversation we can have for like 6 hours. But,
And each one of
Yeah.
those circumstances will be different, and it's going to come to me to make the decision, which is why I'm really hoping for some guidelines. We have requests right now.
For next year?
For next year.
No, I mean,
Well,
other than the extreme.
we have to go into
yeah.
executive session to discuss one, which I do think
Yeah.
might meet
Yeah.
that.
Except, that one condition is the only condition we have right now.
Should I be going and checking the door again?
Is this
That
a
would be
regular?
really helpful.
Do you have any way to communicate with this individual?
I could
Only email.
But
This has come up at the BUHS level, but only extremely infrequently. And I would have to agree that it's not anything you're all of a sudden just gonna make school choice something that can be done easily. It has to be, because I think, you just strip a school and then bye-bye.
But doesn't any high school student have choice of any public high school in the state?
The state has a choice law.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can change, a small number if there's space and if everybody agrees with it. if it
But in
makes sense.
actual fact, it does not arise very much.
No, it doesn't, no.
It's BUHS accepts 10
Yeah.
students
Yeah.
in their freshman year, and the expectation is they're there. If they leave, they're done, and they don't replace them with another person, so it's 10 in the ninth grade.
Yeah, I think it should be extremely cautious. And you don't want to set a precedent.
Yes.
It's, because it's a balancing act the way it is to begin with, so.
I think Jamie framed it quite well, starting the precedent.
Yeah. But are we almost done?
Yes, we're almost done. We're almost
I'm ready
done.
to go home.
I know, I hear you. I hear you.
Pass for me.
It's still Wednesday, or is it Tuesday?
Oh, please,
It's Tuesday.
it's
It's almost
Wednesday. I
Wednesday.
missed your meeting then.
So,
sure
but
you can
we need to
confuse.
give Lyle some marching orders because there's families, so
There are
she's gonna have
families
to
meetings.
make a recommendation, so
Well,
there's
I would make a
families.
motion that the WSESD board would be willing to entertain the idea of school choice in very rare, egregious circumstances.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
I'm not saying that's necessarily the policy, but I think it should be, it shouldn't be something that is just on a.
I have a question. So is it the case that let's say there was a rare circumstance in Dummerston, as you had said before, that you would place a student out of district. Couldn't it just be that that's the model for the rare circumstance? Meaning like, it must be very few, probably maybe with extenuating needs that, if you have a specific program for, let's say, a specific learning disability and we don't have that program, that might be when you'd send a student out.
Right.
But that would be out of placement, and we do have that at the high
Yes, special
school, we have
education
out of
is
placement.
not where
That
that's-
And then there's a,
What would be the other, well, I guess my question would be then is what you mentioned, the other circumstances, what were those other circumstances for a Dummerston? And could we model, because it must be very limited.
I think we need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be doing an executive session to talk about a specific case.
Okay.
So I don't want to give too many examples because I feel like I'm getting too close to reality.
But I think maybe the Rebecca Holcomb, the former Secretary of Education, was like, sometimes a kid just can't work out in a school. And they've tried, every school has done every intervention, but it may be just a clash between, you know, that the kid can't find any social group at all and is, you know, just can't get a second chance within, especially in the small, like there's not another class to go to. So, you know, whatever circumstance that brought a child to that point, you want to give that child an opportunity to be successful, and there is very little opportunity for the child to be successful. There's extreme concern that that child could be successful in that school.
Yeah, I don't want her to come here.
So that would be, that is a Rebecca Holcomb example that
So
would.
there are no, just to clarify, and I don't want to, but, so there are no existing guidelines from, let's take away from Dummerston and from Putney or any of these districts of what they consider.
Yeah, there are at the high school.
Okay.
I was looking for them in the policy manual. I don't know that it's in the policy manual. It may come from the administration, I'm not sure, but it's, you know.
I would think if a child was being
very
bullied and it was a small school, you might want to get a child out of that situation. But, you know, they're very rare cases.
Yes, David.
I think that if we have a motion that talks about rare or egregious or tries to put any qualifications on it, we're gonna have to talk about what does that mean, and then we have to interpret that every time, and I think it's pretty clear. You know, without transportation, anything that happens in the next year is gonna be based on what Lyle recommends and determines is the right thing to do. And if I don't think we should take any action at all at this point unless it's to say that we will talk about this in the coming year and consider various choice options, but that we not make any motion at this point.
Well, Lyle, didn't you ask for a board direction?
I asked for board direction, but if the board direction is I make the decision, what I would likely do is be in touch with Christina and say, I'm not thinking this one, or I think this really rises to the occasion. She may say good, or she may say we probably should take one to the board. But yeah, I think I'm pretty good at determining if it's an extenuating
I
circumstance.
would think you would be too.
I mean, the financial implications of having a student go to another school are very large.
Well, there won't be,
There's
because we're
none.
all one district now, so there's no.
No, but I mean,
money.
No
like there's
transportation.
a student that went to this school and now goes to Bells Falls. So
Right.
if you look at the warrants
Mhm.
that come through, it's all of a sudden, whoa.
But this is within only our, this is within our
This is
districts.
only-
Yeah, okay.
So it's not that, we're not talking about sending them outside the WSESD at all. No,
And
that's not.
no out of placement. And
No.
That's totally
No, no.
different.
This is
Kimball
just-
Farm or
just-
whatever.
Jane.
That's taken care of.
I think we're under the assumption at Putney that the policy that we have that allows teachers to bring their kids to school has been untouched. So there was a statement that you made in the 3 choices that is gone now. And I hope you clarify that statement, because it is my understanding that that's not gone and that is a service that that is a benefit we're offering our teachers.
So we have not discussed this. One of the things that we need to do when we talk about policy is do local board policies now become local school policies and stay in place?
So I thought, voted per Ricky's suggestion at one of the first meetings, that there'd be a year extension for all policies until this board had a chance to review them.
We have not had that meeting yet to do that work with the policies, so.
I thought you blanket allowed all policies
No, we
1
have
year
to warn,
extension.
we have to warn policy adoption 10 days in advance, so we have not done that. So we talked about that a little bit earlier in the meeting, that we have not done that. We hope to do that this summer.
I misunderstood.
So
I thought
there's
you could
no-
blanket say everything stands for the next year as it is now.
No, we're talking about doing that, but we haven't done that. And
Okay.
it is a little bit problematic when I'm just gonna, like,
Deal with it.
it's a little problematic that if one school district, which no longer exists, has a policy for their teachers that's different than like, we're in the same district.
Yeah, that's a policy for the teachers.
So it's a little tricky when I consider this, which is why I had thrown it out there as an idea to make it for all teachers versus taking away from Putney teachers to extend it to all, so.
So we're gonna leave, you can go in executive session, right?
Well, we have to, I mean, he had a motion.
Yeah, there's a motion, we have to finish the motions. So we will, so I believe the motion, and I will paraphrase it a little bit perhaps, Sean, that, well, no, did we change the motion? No, the motion on the table is only in egregious circumstances, right? That was your motion, Sean?
Yeah.
Tim, maybe read it back.
Sure, sorry, wait, he's back at this point. It's gonna take me a second.
I think we can restate, right? The WSESD will allow students to attend. Want to retake a new one? Want me to
Oh,
make
I have it actually,
Okay,
sorry.
good.
He made a motion that the WSESD board is willing to entertain school choice in rare or egregious circumstances.
Hey, that's a safe way.
And then, do you want a friendly amendment as determined by the superintendent, as advised by the superintendent? Because how do, like, you
Sure.
want the superintendent to make?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Even though there's no friendly amendments, we're making one now. As advised by the superintendent.
Yep.
Was there a second on that one?
Yeah.
That was you, that's right. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion to allow school choice in egregious circumstances as advised by the superintendent, please signify by saying aye.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you say allow, I think consider would be
Consider.
a better word than allow.
Consider.
Which one are we voting on?
Consider.
What does it say in
Consider.
there, Tim? Because that's what we're voting on. What gets written down is what we passed.
Just a comment.
Egregious is not the word either, but I
willing
mean,
to
it's
entertain.
No, it isn't the
extenuating.
word.
And that's why I wanted to change it. Extenuating.
Willing to entertain is what I
Willing to entertain.
Extenuating,
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Essentially, what we're doing is we're making a motion to put it on the books, but she would be doing this anyways, even if we didn't have the motion.
Correct.
So,
No, well, she's asking for advice because it doesn't say what to do here.
it doesn't,
So we're
but
giving
the
her direction.
default would be the same.
So it says, all students stay in their own buildings for the next 2 years. The new district board may grant a parent or guardian's request for student enrollment in a different school operated by the new union district based on an individual student circumstances and the superintendent's determination of the school's capacity to serve the child. So I understand that if a school cannot offer the best education possible for the child, and another school could, and there's room, so the other school's not hiring new personnel or anything, then I could make the determination that that student should be allowed to transfer.
So this would be broader,
What you're passing now,
is more minimized.
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes have it. We have direction for Lyle. Do we want to discuss the teacher issue, or do we want to table that discussion?
The what?
Will teachers have the ability to extend the Putney benefit to the WSSD, or do we want to table that motion based on the very late hour?
Yeah, table.
Table the discussion.
Can we just say that for the first year, things will continue as they have? Or is that
So-
too fuzzy?
So Putney's policy
Yeah.
stays in place.
Yeah, I mean, people have already come.
It's contrary to this, though, because it's the student circumstances is determined by the superintendent. So it's contrary to that is my concern. So,
Could you just say however, in cases of teachers?
well, we're not amending that.
Well, this is a past practice thing too. This is different than, these are things that arise.
Yes, Kelly, sorry.
Do we know how many students this would actually affect?
Do you know,
Off the top of my head, no.
I think there's one, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that student's ready for school yet.
Oh, I know who you're thinking of. There was another one, but I think that teacher has gone to another school.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to have like better understanding next week of how many students this would affect? I mean,
It might be two people, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it might not be.
We're not talking a lot of people.
Yeah, so it might just be
And it was really specifically related to a couple of people who couldn't work in Putney if they had to get their kids to preschool or kindergarten and then somewhere else. So that was where it came from, was not, yay, let's bring all our teachers' kids here. It was, I'd love to take this job, but I can't get my kid to kindergarten and get to your school at time. So that was where it came from.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? What is the process by which you'll determine that? Because that could have a really significant impact on our school. So it seems like that's something that needs to be warned and we need to be able to come and speak to.
I think we need to get a reading about what the articles allow us to do and not, because past practice was we all had our own districts. So like, I think maybe this needs, my initial thing was like, well, let's just do that and make it better for everybody. But now when I read this, that's not special circumstances in my first read of it. And so what can we do? I mean, I'm trying to be Gumby here, but I don't know what we can do, because we're not amending this before the start of the school year. That's our only way to fix that, is to have an amendment, and that just a 40-day warning, and it's the middle of the summer, and we haven't even agreed on a policy, and that's not an easy policy. So we have to figure that out. And so I think we need to I think if it's okay, we can direct Lyle to, I don't know, ask what attorney or how to get guidance on
I'd go to the SBA first and see what they say.
Okay, see what they say, okay.
Because they're free. Well, they're not free, they cost us dues, but.
Yeah, but at least see what their thought is, because this is a pretty not a controversial issue anyway, in terms of.
Is Putney the only school that's different than all the other schools?
You're the only one that I know of that has that policy.
But does no other school have a unique policy?
No, the high school does.
The high school has that
Yeah.
policy. Yes, other schools have unique policies.
That's what I'm concerned
Yes.
about, is why would this policy, like, we would need to do an analysis of all policies and all unique policies in order to address this.
This policy is in conflict with an article of agreement. So that allowing teachers to take their kids to the school they work in is in conflict with Article 3A.
And we've done an analysis of all policies that are unique and made sure that they're not in conflict with articles?
No. Others are things like you can't have pets in school, you can't, I mean, different schools have different policies. And those are not in conflict with these.
Dog policies are not in the articles. Attendance policies, practices are in the articles. So, we have parents waiting, so I would entertain a motion to move into executive session under 1 VSA 313 to discuss student records which are not in the, oh my gosh, I'm tired, are not,
Premature public knowledge.
premature public knowledge, I'll say that, yes, that's where not
Put the district at
available
distinct
for public knowledge, yeah. Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we will enter executive session at 9:51.
We will go into this room.
Okay. So we rise from executive session at 10:11. I would entertain a motion to approve the determination of the superintendent on the parent request.
So moved.
Is there a second? Guess that was Tim. I mean, that was Sean, sorry. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays and abstentions? The ayes appear to have it, the ayes have it. So scheduling, I need to tuck a quick meeting before our presentation at 7 o'clock on the 25th. I don't even remember what's on the agenda at this hour of the night, but I think it's only 15 minutes, so if we make it for 6:30, we're all there and can make sure we're elevated
So the,
in the rest of the time. I also need to do some scheduling for our next meeting.
so the 25th is gonna be at 6:30?
Yeah, we'll just have a quick 20-minute meeting and get a few things done.
Okay. Yes.
And then I was thinking we would not have a meeting during 4th of July week, because I'm sure people would be going all over the place. And Sean's already ready to kill me with the length of this meeting, so I want a little time to go by before I have another meeting. The week of July 8th.
I'm not here. Back the truck.
I don't want to hear from her. So, I just don't want to,
Could we do this by email?
I could do this by email, but are people,
I think it'd be better because then people could look at their calendars and, yeah.
okay, and schedule a meeting for the 11th, for the week of the 11th.
How many people don't have their calendars? Not saying we can't, but do you have it or no?
Have what?
Calendar?
No,
In front of me? No.
Oh, okay.
I also like to advise people not to say they're not going to be here when we're on camera.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I was going,
So, I'd like to remind everybody that communicating about scheduling is specifically excluded from open meeting law, so we can get it done. It takes 2 days to do it that way, 1 day if you're only replying to Christina. I mean, like 1 week or a month, 1 year, so, yeah.
So my hope is to do a meeting that week if we have a quorum around to do that, so I will send out an email. I'll send it out tonight, and let me know when you're available that week, because I know people are traveling for the holiday weekend. And then after that, should we try to meet on the week of the 22nd of July? Okay, I'm gonna send out everything by email. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Did you determine?
Go for it, Ann.
Well, and we should bring on the
25th,
tradition,
okay. The 25th before our before our annual budget meeting.
Do you want to see if it's here, or do you want it down there? Where do you want
I thought we just have it down there and have a very quick.
So you don't need a separate one?
I don't know, I don't need anything special, just,
That's all I need to know.
there was something that I had to get done and I don't know what it is now.
For these upcoming meetings, would we be also determining via email where they're gonna be, like in what town?
Yes, I think we owe Guilford a turn, and I think we haven't met in Putney yet. So we could do Guilford and Putney in our next go-rounds.
Okay, I'll need to check in.
Oh,
Because of
available.
right, summer cleaning
Oh,
schedules,
yeah.
all of that, so.
Yeah, so actually that is all dependent on summer floor schedules. Yeah.
Yeah.
I only know the Dummerston schedule, so yeah, everything becomes, so I'll find availability, we'll find a place, we'll plan the party, we'll find the event hall later. I would entertain, and I will send that email out tonight, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? The ayes appear to have, the ayes do have it. Thank you very much, BCTV, you earned your money tonight.
Oh, hey.